The screech of carriage wheels on uneven cobblestones jolted me from my stupor. A frigid gust blew through the window, carrying the stench of livestock, smoke, and rust, instantly clearing my mind. I, Karl von Schmidt, the seventh son of Duke Schmidt, was currently rattling through a grim, rugged city. Moments ago, I was a corporate slave in a brightly lit office, staring at a PPT until my heart seized and the screen's 3 a.m. timestamp faded into black. Now, I inhabit this worn-out carriage, burdened with the 17 years of memories belonging to the original Karl. The Schmidt family is a powerhouse within the Plantagenet kingdom. As the youngest legitimate son, I gained nothing from my status. My mother was a low-born mistress, and I was notoriously mediocre in a family obsessed with battle chi and magic. I couldn't master battle chi, lacked magical affinity, and was barely competent with a sword. I was a transparent figure, my name Karl, as common as a peasant's, reflecting my father's indifference. Damn it, what a hellish start, I muttered, rubbing my throbbing temples. I hadn't enjoyed a single day of noble luxury before being saddled with the Northern Frontier Expansion Decree. Sorting through my memories, I grasped the situation. The Solon barbarians raided the border annually, and the Plantagenet kingdom's control over the north was crumbling. The king issued the pioneering decree, forcing nobles to send their sons to reclaim land and guard the border at their own expense. It was a ploy to weaken the nobility while offloading the burden of border defense. Naturally, no noble would send their elite heirs to die, so expendable, unwanted sons like me were the perfect candidates. We were given pathetic expansion corps to fulfill the decree. My own unit was a prime example. 2 mediocre first-tier knights, likely washed-up veterans or inexperienced fools. 6 knight squires and 30 militia, mostly farmers who had just learned to hold a spear, plus 1,000 gold coins and some grain. The gold felt like hush money for a suicide mission. I looked out the window again. Franz City, the first fortress of the north, was my destination. It was a grim place of gray stone, narrow, filthy streets, and people with hollow, wary eyes. Armed soldiers and mercenaries patrolled everywhere, radiating a lethal aura far sharper than the guards at the royal capital. The city was suffocating under a state of constant, tense preparation for war. It wasn't a city, it was a desperate frontier fortress. Damn it. I cursed again, my prospects feeling grimmer than the city walls. With 38 men and these supplies, I was expected to fight the Solon barbarians? It was a death sentence. Panic surged through me. I was just a modern office worker, completely out of my depth. Just as despair took hold, a cold, mechanical voice echoed in my mind. Intelligence system loading. Load complete. Binding to host. Host identified. Karl von Schmidt. Binding successful. I jumped, scanning the empty carriage in shock. A hallucination? Before I could process it, information flooded my brain. Intelligence system. Daily missions provide intelligence on resources, secrets, faction movements, or future events. Initial mission. Report to the governor of the northern province, Count Rockefort of Franz City. Incomplete. I sat stunned for 10 seconds, processing the impossible. A system? A cheat code? This was the stuff of web novels. My heart hammered against my ribs, my fingertips trembling with excitement. A ray of light had pierced the darkness. The system didn't grant godlike power, but it provided intelligence. In this hostile, unknown environment, accurate information was the most valuable asset I could imagine. Calm down. I breathed, forcing myself to focus. This system was my only lifeline. My first task was simple: report to Count Rockefort, the governor of the north. It was logical to seek authorization and information from the local authority. Driver, I shouted through the front window to my squire. Yes, my lord. He replied, looking at me with a mix of awe and confusion. Head straight to the governor's mansion. We are meeting Governor Rockefort. I kept my voice steady. Yes, my lord. He whipped the horses, and we moved through the oppressive streets. I sat back, sharpening my focus as I recalled everything about Count Rockefort. He was a ruthless, pragmatic, iron-fisted ruler who had survived the brutal north, a loyalist, but a cold one. He would likely view me as an expendable noble sent here to die. Regardless, I had to take this step. It was a system mission. We arrived at the fortress-like mansion after 15 minutes. Heavily armed guards in black armor scrutinized my pathetic little group. I straightened my travel clothes, took a deep breath, and stepped out. My two first-tier knights, a stoic, graying veteran and a nervous youth, silently flanked me. I nodded to the veteran and approached the gate captain. I am Karl von Schmidt, here by the king's pioneering decree and Duke Schmidt's orders to serve in the north. I am here to report to the governor. I kept my tone firm and respectful. The captain glanced at me and my lackluster squad, a flicker of contempt in his eyes, though his manners remained formal. Wait here, Lord Schmidt. I will send word inside. The wait was agonizing, the guards' gazes piercing me like needles. Soon, a scribe in official robes emerged. The scribe spoke with cold, bureaucratic detachment. Lord Count Rockefort is occupied. Wait in the side chamber. My heart sank. The delay was a clear dismissal, but I nodded calmly. Thank you. We were led through dim, frigid corridors into a sparse, cold room. Wait here until the count is free, the scribe said, bowing before leaving me with my two knights. Time crawled by. No one entered. My middle-aged knight stood like a statue, while the younger one shifted, showing signs of impatience. I realized this was a power play, or perhaps we were simply too insignificant to warrant his immediate attention. I checked my system task list. Incomplete. Merely entering the mansion wasn't enough. I had to face the count personally. As I considered bribing my way in, the system chimed. Daily intelligence updated, trial privilege. Intelligence. Count Rockefort is with his mistress, a merchant's wife. He hates being disturbed by doomed southern nobles. You will wait 2 hours and receive no aid. My eyes narrowed. So he wasn't busy. He was avoiding me, labeling me doomed trash. Waiting was a waste of time. My gaze turned sharp. I didn't come here to be humiliated. I turned to the guard. Tell the count that Karl of the Schmidt family has urgent intelligence regarding kobold activity in the Black Forest that threatens the supply lines. If he is too busy to listen, I will handle it myself, but he will bear the consequences of the delay. My voice carried an unexpected weight. The threat was calculated. Supply lines were a sensitive topic for any northern commander. I emphasized now and consequences. The guard hesitated, unnerved by my sudden shift in demeanor. My knights looked on in surprise. The older one's eyes glinted. The guard hurried off to report. My heart raced. The gamble was set. Now, I would see if the count valued his mistress over his supply lines. The system task remained incomplete. Heavy footsteps echoed down the hall. I stood straight as the door burst open. Count Rockefort, governor of the northern province, stood there. He was a large man in casual furs, his face twisted in cold, bear-like rage. His scribe and a sharp-eyed guard captain followed. Rockefort locked eyes with me, his gaze filled with irritation at being disturbed. Schmidt's youngest, right? The useless one, he sneered. Like the rest of the noble scum sent north. He tapped the table. Except you have a talent for pissing people off. He loomed over me. Explain the kobolds and the supply lines. If you're lying, your pleasant trip ends now. I'll toss you and your rabble out to face the Solon barbarians myself. I kept my face calm despite his naked threat. I knew his anger was merely a reaction to the interruption, and I had my leverage. As he entered, the system chimed. Task. Report to Count Rockefort. Completed. Reward intelligence. A supply convoy leaves Black Creek Stronghold in 3 days for Black Crow Outpost. 50 kobolds are lying in ambush at Split Rock Canyon. The detail was impeccable. I met his gaze and spoke with steady precision. My observations indicate a convoy departs Black Creek for Black Crow in 3 days, crossing the southern Black Forest. 50 kobolds are currently lying in ambush at Split Rock Canyon. The Count's rage flickered into suspicion. If you doubt me, I will lead the escort, but I need 30 of your men to handle the ambush. It was a gamble to verify the intel and secure resources. Rockefort stared at me, his gray-blue eyes piercing. Silence filled the room. Finally, he spoke, his voice cold but devoid of his earlier fury. Richter. The guard captain stepped forward. Yes, my lord. Take 30 veterans from the city guard. In 3 days, follow this Lord Karl to Black Creek, Rockefort ordered. Yes, Richter acknowledged, eyeing me with curiosity before leaving. Rockefort turned back to me, his tone still harsh but tempered. Follow me. He walked away without looking back. I followed, leaving my knights behind at his silent command. He led me to a war room. A massive map of the northern frontier covered the wall, marked with various symbols. Rockefort pointed with a wooden rod. By the pioneering decree, you can claim any unclaimed land, provided you can hold it against monsters or barbarians. He circled areas on the map. The red circles are taken. You aren't the last to arrive. You still have choices. I stepped forward, studying the map. To the south lay France City. To the east, the North Sea. To the west and north, dangerous, unknown territories marked with skulls and Solan influence. A peninsula to the coast was marked Valaya Protectorate, encircled in yellow, off-limits. I scanned the map, rapidly analyzing the strategic pros and cons of the available territories. 3 areas stood out. First, the region near France City. It offered fertile land, a self-sufficient agricultural base, a large recruitment pool, and the Amber Bay port for trade and supplies. Crucially, its proximity to France City theoretically allowed for support from Rockefort. However, the map marked it as a primary target for Solan barbarian raids. The military pressure would be immense, and I couldn't guarantee Rockefort would actually provide aid. Second was the remote western peninsula. It was far from the Solan core, protected by natural barriers, and accessible by sea for supplies. The land was reportedly fertile. The downside was its narrow geography. If the connection point were cut, I'd be trapped. Furthermore, the port froze in winter, severing supply lines. Third was the mountainous region near the Valaya border. It offered potential alliance with Valaya, defensible terrain for guerrilla warfare, and rich mineral resources. Yet, Valaya was an unreliable ally, constantly flip-flopping between the Plantagenet and Solan factions. The sparse population also made large-scale agriculture or recruitment impossible. Time was short. The third option was too volatile. The second was a death trap in winter. The first option, despite the danger, was the only one with a reliable supply hub and a solid population base. Crisis brings opportunity. Moreover, my intelligence system might allow me to anticipate threats early. I made my choice, pointing to an abandoned fortress near France City, Confort. Governor, I choose Confort and its surrounding areas. Rockefort raised an eyebrow, his expression mocking. Confort? That ruin? It was a military outpost, overrun by Solonians 3 times and abandoned 5 years ago. A bold choice, kid. He looked at me meaningfully. I found another talent of yours. You love picking the hardest bones. I'll have the paperwork prepared. It's yours on paper. Whether you can hold it is up to you. Get out. Be at the docks 3 days from now at dawn. Don't make my men wait. Rockefort waved me off. I bowed and left the council hall. Rejoining my 2 knights outside the governor's mansion, I finally exhaled as I breathed in the cold, crisp air of France City. The first step was taken. Mission accomplished. I had the intelligence, temporary command authority, and 30 soldiers. Yet, looking at the grim city and my meager force, I knew the real challenge was just beginning. The kobold ambush in 3 days would be my first test. Looking at my exhausted, bewildered men, I needed to find shelter. I initially hoped to find a decent inn for them, but every innkeeper shook their head. Sorry, my lord, we're full. Other lords have booked everything. I realized other young nobles were hiding in the city, using alcohol to delay reporting to the governor's mansion. They acted as if avoiding the paperwork would keep the dangers of the northern frontier away. This ostrich mentality left the inns packed while the better frontier lands remained unclaimed. I chuckled at their cowardice, but I still had 40 men to house. I spotted the city guard patrolling and had an idea. I sent a squire to find Richter, the guard captain, and headed his way with my 2 knights. Richter was surprised to see me in the guardroom. Lord Carl, is there something else? The inns are full, Captain. I request permission for my men and me to stay in the city guard barracks tonight. Richter looked stunned. My lord, you can't stay in the barracks. Your soldiers can squeeze in, but surely you deserve better. You could force the innkeepers to give up a room. They wouldn't dare refuse a noble. He was right. I could have pulled rank. I shook my head. No, I stay where my soldiers stay. A commander who enjoys comfort while his men suffer is no commander of mine. My words reached everyone behind me. Brendan and Roland looked at me with newfound respect, and the squires stood taller. The militia, who had felt like cannon fodder, stared at me in disbelief. They were simple men, but they knew who valued them. My words cut through their fear, making them realize their new lord was different. Richter, too, seemed to reevaluate me, his surprise replaced by a hint of respect. If you insist, follow me. But the barracks are in poor condition. Be prepared. Thank you, I replied. He led us to a camp near the western wall. The air inside was thick with the stench of sweat, leather, mold, and cheap ale. The low barracks were crumbling, with windows boarded up or covered in oil paper. The yard was a muddy mess of manure, and the guards looked lazy. Richter opened a large, empty room that smelled of rot. It was a warehouse. It's drafty, but if you lay down straw and set up tents, it'll do. The room was empty, the floor was packed dirt, and cold wind whistled through the walls. It's perfect. Thank you, Captain. Richter nodded and left, promising to send straw and hot water. I immediately began directing the work. The squires and militia worked together to clean the floor and pitch our tents. My small tent was placed in the center by mutual agreement. No one complained. They worked with vigor, seeing that I was working right alongside them, unbothered by the filth. We ate our black bread and salted meat, and the exhausted men soon fell into a deep sleep. Old Knight Brendan set the watch, and the camp grew quiet, save for the crackling fire and distant horns. I lay on my cot, too tired to sleep, yet too wired to rest. I listened to the footsteps of the guards and the restless tossing of Roland in the next tent. Roland, still awake? I asked softly. A rustle came from the next tent, and Roland whispered, My lord, you too? I'm just a bit excited and nervous. Because of the operation in 3 days? I asked. Partly, Roland replied with youthful vigor. To be honest, I came to the Northern Territory for a real adventure. My training in the royal capital was stagnant. I wanted to prove myself here. I smiled silently. A classic dream. But it's dangerous. You could die. A knight cannot fear danger, Roland insisted. Defending my lord is my duty. I paused, then turned to the other side. Brendan, what about you? Seeking adventure too? Brendan, the veteran, replied in a gravelly, steady voice. My lord, I simply felt you needed a proper knight by your side. When the Duke asked for volunteers, I stepped up. As Roland said, it is my duty. Simple, yet loyal. They were my only reliance. I understand, I said. Rest now. Tomorrow we begin. They agreed, and silence fell. I closed my eyes, but sleep eluded me. I mentally reviewed the system's intelligence on the Kobold ambush, memorizing every detail. With 30 City Guard veterans and my 38 men, mostly questionable militia, I faced 50 kobolds. Theoretically, I had the advantage, but terrain would be the deciding factor. I studied the map, plotting how to use the terrain to counter the kobolds. Only late at night did I drift into a fitful sleep on the cold, hard cot. It was my first night in this world, spent in a dilapidated France City barracks. The future was uncertain, but I had taken the first step and seemingly earned a sliver of their loyalty. At 6 a.m., the sky was still gray, and France City remained asleep. I rose, washing with freezing water to shake off the last of my fatigue. Without hesitation, I woke Brendan and Roland. Wake everyone. Assemble at the parade ground. I commanded. Brendan looked surprised but obeyed immediately. Roland eagerly began rousing the sleeping soldiers. Soon, 30 militia and 6 knight squires stood on the cold ground, bleary-eyed and grumbling. The morning chill bit through their clothes, leaving many shivering. I scanned the demoralized, poorly equipped group. I needed to provide immediate motivation. From today, you are no longer cannon fodder, I declared, my voice cutting through the silence. You are the first army under me, Karl von Schmidt, the future Lord of Confort. Here is your pay. Combat soldiers get 1 silver coin and 50 copper coins monthly. Auxiliary soldiers get 1 silver coin. The news hit them like a bolt of lightning, instantly evaporating their sleepiness. They had expected only a one-time settlement allowance, not a recurring salary. The pay was better than some standing armies in the royal capital. I continued. We have 36 men divided into 3 squads. 2 squads, 24 men, are combat soldiers. The remaining 12 are auxiliaries for logistics. This isn't permanent, I said sharply. Monthly assessments will determine promotions based on fitness, discipline, and skill. Slackers will be demoted. The first month's pay, I emphasized, will be issued in 3 days after we successfully complete our escort mission. Performance bonuses will follow. The clear rules and immediate rewards ignited a fire in their eyes. The lethargy was replaced by anticipation. I raised a hand. Don't thank me with words. Thank me with action. Train hard and become my sword and shield. Now start running. I knew that for a cold weapon era army, fitness and discipline outweighed individual prowess. Most of war is marching, not fighting. Long marches and maintaining formations require absolute obedience and stamina. I lacked time to polish their skills, but I could enforce the basics. Run around the grounds. Do not stop without my order. They began to jog. The formation immediately fell apart. They were clumsy, breathless, and confused. Their previous training had clearly ignored basic fitness and discipline. Faster. Keep the formation, Roland shouted. Brendan was more direct, using his staff to prod anyone lagging or drifting, ensuring they felt the sting of their mistakes. Distinguish your left from your right, you idiots. Follow the man in front. I barked, running alongside them. The sounds of the staff, heavy breathing, and shouting pierced the morning air. The commotion woke the city guard. Who the hell is making that noise? They cursed, rushing out. Seeing the ragtag group training, their anger flared. But when they saw me, the 2 young knights, and the sheer number of men, they swallowed their insults. They recognized the knights and the discipline of a unified force. It wasn't worth provoking a group of men who were clearly being led by a serious noble. Picking a fight with men about to head into danger was a losing proposition. Idiots rushing to their deaths, one muttered. They grumbled and returned to their barracks, though sleep was now impossible. By 8 a.m., the morning exercise ended. The soldiers collapsed, exhausted but sharing a newfound sense of collective identity. After a quick breakfast, we began formation and combat drills. I implemented a formation suited for small-scale combat. I utilized a simplified variation of the Mandarin duck formation, similar to a small 3-talent formation, to maximize our limited numbers. I reorganized them. The front row consisted of sword and shield infantry for protection. The middle row provided ranged support with hunting bows. The rear row were spearmen for mid-range defense. I personally demonstrated each position, explaining how to coordinate and shift formations on command. Seeing me organize this simple yet effective formation left the 2 knights stunned. Brendan, in particular, looked at me with deep suspicion and intrigue. This formation wasn't taught in night schools. It was practical, lethal, and bore the marks of someone who had seen real, bloody combat. I wondered if this useless, young master was actually a veteran in disguise. Brendan, what do you think of this formation? I asked. Brendan replied solemnly. It's practical, sir. It maximizes our limited numbers and mixed equipment, compensating for our lack of individual strength. It's not a formation typical nobles would know. I smiled, as long as it works. The training ground erupted with shouts, the clash of wooden weapons, and our constant corrections. The energetic sounds penetrated the governor's mansion nearby. Count Rockefort was sleeping soundly with his mistress. He had ordered the scribe not to disturb him. Yet, the persistent shouting woke him. What is that noise? His mistress grumbled. Rockefort frowned, listening intently. Who is training at this hour? He threw off his quilt, annoyed. His mistress helped him into his robe. Rockefort walked out, meeting the guard captain, Richter. Richter, who is making all this noise? Richter replied awkwardly. It's Karl von Schmidt, sir. He's been training his men since dawn. Schmidt's boy. Rockefort recalled the young man who chose the difficult confort. He looked toward the training ground. He saw a group moving in disciplined order, a stark contrast to the drunken nobles he was used to. His anger faded into curiosity. Interesting, he muttered. Is he actually planning something, or just cramming for his mission? He turned to Richter. Let him be. When you send troops with him in 2 days, pick some sharp ones to see what he's really capable of. Yes, sir, Richter replied. Rockefort yawned, deciding to return to bed. He had found something worth watching. After lunch, I eased the training intensity. These militia recruits were fragile. Overworking them would lead to injury or resentment. Preserving their strength for the upcoming battle was vital. I had Brendan and Roland lead recovery stretches and drill the small three-talent formation for coordination rather than physical exhaustion. As I pondered our next steps, the system chimed. Daily mission updated. Mission: purchase 10 matchlock muskets and 10 sets of leather armor. Incomplete. This was perfect. I needed these for my formation. Archers were too slow to train for my immediate needs. Matchlock muskets were simple, effective at close range against unarmored foes, and leather armor would keep my men alive. Brendan, come with me to the armory market. I needed his expertise to avoid being swindled. Yes, sir. The market was in the northwest corner of France City, controlled by the governor. Rockefort knew that the Northern Frontier Expansion Decree would bring many nobles needing equipment. He profited while controlling the flow of weapons. However, the market was deserted. Shopkeepers were dozing or complaining. The other pioneering nobles were still drinking in inns. When Brendan and I entered, the shopkeepers looked at us like starving wolves. They swarmed us with sales pitches. I silenced them and asked, "What's the price for matchlock muskets and leather armor?" A chubby shopkeeper pushed forward. "I have the latest from the south. 5 silver coins per musket, 1 gold and 2 silver for leather armor. 5 gold per musket, 1 gold and 2 silver per armor." It was pricey, but manageable. Brendan inspected the gear, checking the mechanisms and leather quality. "The muskets are standard, and the leather is thick enough for kobolds," he whispered. I looked at the merchant. "I want 10 muskets and 40 sets of armor. 70 gold coins total." I cut the price aggressively. The merchant groaned. "That's below cost. 90 gold, please." I turned to leave. "Brendan, let's go." "Wait." "Fine, 70 it is," the merchant cried. He quickly packed the goods, still making a profit. I had Brendan pay and ordered the merchant to deliver the goods to the barracks. The system chimed. Mission complete. Reward: information on Old Moore, a slave in the West District Market. He was an assistant engineer for the kingdom who helped build Confort. He knows the terrain and weaknesses of the fortress. My eyes lit up. A military engineer who knew Confort was exactly what I needed. He would be the perfect guide and engineer for my reconstruction efforts. I suppressed the urge to rush to the slave market and told Brendan, "I need laborers for the new equipment. Let's check the West District Market for cheap, capable hands." Brendan agreed, and we headed toward the foul-smelling, chaotic West District slave market. Under a massive wooden shed, vendors screamed, "Strong war captives. Excellent workers." Others hawked delicate southern maids and sturdy northern savages for cannon fodder. A crowd gathered around a cage where a vendor boasted of a deep-mist forest elf with magical potential. The girl inside was pale and ragged. While she had faint traces of magic, she was clearly no legendary elf. I ignored the spectacle and walked to the third row, locating cage 17. Inside sat Old Moore, a ragged, gray-haired man whose sharp, scrutinizing gaze stood out among the listless slaves. I stopped before his cage. Brendan, though puzzled, struck the bars with his scabbard to wake the vendor. The vendor fawned. "Interested in the old man? He's a former official, good with numbers. 10 silver coins. 10 is too much." "2," I replied coolly. The vendor, having failed to sell the man for ages, quickly agreed. I bought him, and Brendan paid the 2 silver coins. The vendor released Moore and handed me the tether. As I touched Moore's arm, the system confirmed my target. I left the market immediately with my new acquisition. In a quiet spot, I faced the silent, complex-eyed old man. "You're Moore, right? Formerly of the Royal Capital's Military Engineering Bureau? You worked on the Confort project." Moore trembled, staring at me in disbelief. "How do you know? Who are you?" "I am Karl von Schmidt, the new pioneer lord of Confort. I saw your name in the archives. I need someone who understands fortification, and you are the best." Moore's shock turned to bitterness. "Confort? That thrice-abandoned grave? You're walking to your death, Lord. What can a slave like me do? I bought you out of that cage, and I will stop Confort from being a grave," I stated firmly. "Do you want to pick up your drafting tools again, or rot here as a slave?" Moore's chest heaved as he looked at my steady face, his years of despair finding an outlet. "If you truly intend to rebuild, if you need my knowledge, I can still draw accurate lines, my lord." "Good," I said. "Brendan, remove his shackles. He is a hired hand now, not a slave." Moore sighed, a flicker of long-extinguished hope returning to his eyes. I brought him back to my tent at the city guard barracks. Noticing him shivering in the northern frontier's cold, I grew concerned. I gave Brendan a quiet order. Brendan returned with thick, clean clothes and a parcel of hot black bread and roasted meat. "Change and eat," I said, keeping my tone casual. Moore took the items, his hands trembling. He was unaccustomed to such kindness, having known only abuse. "Thank you, my lord," he stammered. "Change quickly," I said, turning to study my map to give him privacy. Moore changed into the warm clothes. The warmth eased his stiff body. He crouched in the corner to eat. The bread was coarse but filling, and the meat was rich and fragrant. The warmth spread through him, bringing color back to his face. He watched me as he ate. I remained focused on the map, tracing lines with my finger. Despite my youth, my profile appeared resolute. To Moore, I seemed to possess a weight and strength beyond my years. His dead heart began to stir with life. He recalled his old blueprints and the ambitions crushed by politics. Perhaps this time would be different. Perhaps this young lord could create a miracle in the north, and perhaps his own old bones still had purpose. A mix of gratitude and hope surged within him. He finished his meal and stood up, walking behind me. His posture was straighter now. He whispered, "Thank you, Lord Carl." The next morning, training began with a new addition, matchlock musket practice. I distributed the 9 muskets, keeping one for myself, and had Brendan and Roland teach the soldiers how to load and fire. "Don't spare the powder," I ordered. "Get used to the recoil. Good shots get extra food. The worst 3 wash everyone's socks." The soldiers were nervous but excited by the new weapons. The range was filled with smoke and noise. While their aim was poor, the atmosphere was electric. The expenditure of ammunition proved to them that I was investing heavily in their success. The commotion reached the governor's mansion, where Count Rockefort was already awake. I stood by the study window with a glass of mulled wine, watching my small unit train in the courtyard. They were finally starting to look like soldiers. 2 days of intensive live-fire training with expensive muskets and ammunition proved this wasn't just a whim. "It seems I underestimated the Schmidt boy," I heard Count Rockefort mutter while sipping his wine. He had expected me to be another disposable noble waiting to die, but my actions had clearly surprised him. "Perhaps he can survive in the north," he mused, eyes gleaming. "Maybe even become a thorn in the side of the sullen barbarians." He smiled. If I succeeded, he, as governor, would share the credit. He turned to his guard captain. "Richter, are the men assigned to assist him ready?" "Yes, my lord," Richter replied. 30 well-equipped veterans, ready to depart at dawn. Rockefort nodded. "The operation is under Carl's command. You will follow his orders." Richter hesitated. "My lord, he is young and lacks combat experience. If he fails..." Rockefort waved him off. "It's just a group of kobolds. It's a cheap price to pay to see if he's truly capable or just a desk strategist." "Understood," Richter said, though he clearly harbored doubts. That afternoon, I gathered Brendan, Roland, and Old Moore in my tent. I spread out the maps, using Old Moore's intel on Conford and the system's data on the Split Rock Canyon ambush site to plan our operation. We mapped out march routes, formation spacing, scout distances, and the timing for our musket volleys within the narrow canyon. I felt a rush of adrenaline, blending modern military theory with my own tactical experience to adapt to this world's realities. Brendan and Roland were stunned by the level of detail I required for such a small skirmish. Old Moore provided expert insights on the terrain and kobold behavior. Planning a Real battle felt far more exhilarating than any RTS game I had ever played. This was my first command. I had to be perfect. Suddenly, the system chimed. Daily task updated. Task: purchase a gift for Lady Isla, the jeweler's wife, and present it to her. Incomplete. My excitement vanished. A gift for the governor's mistress? I was busy planning a military operation, not playing social games. Yet, I couldn't ignore the system. What if this was vital to Rockefort's favor? "Continue without me," I told my confused officers, leaving the camp with a scowl. I had to do this discreetly to avoid being seen as a bribe giver, which would ruin my reputation. If Rockefort found out, it wouldn't matter. He was already providing 30 veterans, so I'd treat this as a return favor. I learned that Lady Isla was obsessed with Siren's Tear, a blue pearl accessory from the Southern Islands. I spent 10 gold coins on a silver bracelet set with the pearls. By evening, I tracked her to a high-end tavern. I approached her, stammering a clumsy excuse about thanking the governor for his support. Isla was delighted by the bracelet and teased me for being more socially adept than the usual stuffy nobles. I fled the tavern as soon as I could, hearing the task completion chime. Task: gift for Lady Isla completed. Reward: Isla's husband, Grim, has discovered her affair. Instead of anger, he is thrilled, seeing it as a chance to expand his luxury business in the north. I stared at the notification, speechless. I spent 10 gold for gossip. This was useless for my battle or the reconstruction of Confort. I felt a deep sense of frustration with the system. Apparently, the daily intel wasn't always a lifesaver. At least I know the governor's secrets. I sighed, returning to camp to focus on the only thing that mattered, my first battle. That, at least, was real. 4 a.m. the next day. The northern sky was a deep, ink blue, with only a faint hint of dawn. The cold was biting, turning our breath into frost. I dressed in my cold leather armor, shivering. I woke Brendan and Roland with a sharp command. Wake everyone. Assemble in the courtyard. We move out. The men moved quickly, motivated by the previous day's training and their pay. They gathered their gear, combat soldiers checking weapons, auxiliaries counting supplies. 38 men assembled. They were far more disciplined than they had been 2 days ago. Torchlight flickered over their tense, eager faces. I kept my voice low but firm. Remember your training. Run to the docks. No talking. Maintain formation. No speeches, just orders. We jogged out of the camp, disappearing into the pre-dawn darkness of France City. Oldmore stayed behind. He was too frail for the march. The freezing air stung my lungs, sharpening my focus. The 10-kilometer trek was grueling for the militia, but no one fell behind. Only the sound of rhythmic footsteps and the clanking of gear echoed through the streets. The discipline I had instilled was finally paying off. We reached the docks while it was still dark. The North Sea wind blew in, carrying the scent of salt and ice. Richter and his 30 veterans hadn't arrived yet. Rest, stay quiet. Auxiliaries, prepare a hot meal, I ordered. We needed the energy. We set up portable stoves, boiling water with dried meat and hard bread to make a thick, warming soup. My soldiers ate in silence, eyes darting toward the dark river, waiting for reinforcements. At 6 a.m., the sky began to brighten. A disciplined group of shadows approached along the bank, their armor and weapons glinting in the dawn. It was Captain Richter and 30 veteran city guards. Their steady, sharp-eyed formation stood in stark contrast to my own green recruits. Richter seemed surprised to find us already finished with breakfast. He saluted. Lord Carl, apologies for the wait. Per the governor's orders, my 30 men are under your command. I nodded, skipping pleasantries. Ready to depart, my lord. Richter replied crisply. Good. We must reach Black Creek Stronghold before the transport convoy leaves. Richter signaled his men. His veterans merged with my group, bringing our total to 70, a much more formidable force. I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of my first real command. Move out. We marched along the muddy riverbank toward the stronghold. I abandoned the carriage for a riding horse, flanked by Brendan and Roland, with Richter trailing. We marched toward the unknown. The dawn light stretched our determined shadows. By 8 a.m., we reached Black Creek Stronghold. This stronghold was merely a small, fenced camp with wooden shacks, housing 20 soldiers who guarded the river and supplies. A convoy of 5 heavy carts, pulled by horses and managed by laborers, awaited us. 30 armed mercenaries stood by, the escort for the Black Crow outpost run. They stared, curious at our larger, better-equipped force. A middle-aged man in worn leather armor, likely the leader, approached and saluted. Who might you be, he asked. Count Rockefort had mentioned an escort, but not who. Karl von Schmidt. I am here to escort you to Black Crow outpost by order of Governor Rockefort. He blinked, then noticed Richter's veterans. Ah, Lord Karl and Captain Richter. I am Barton, the convoy leader. He looked troubled. My lord, is this really necessary? He gestured to his men. We have 30 fighters. The Soren barbarians have retreated for spring planting, and we've never had issues with the occasional kobold or goblin. Isn't the governor being overly cautious? His tone was one of annoyance. His mercenaries nodded, fearing we would only slow them down. Richter looked on, expressionless but clearly sympathetic to Barton. In the northern frontier, such large escorts were indeed rare. I remained calm, realizing the gap between system intelligence and common perception. I couldn't reveal my source. Captain Barton, this is an order. The north is volatile. We will handle security. You just keep moving. Barton swallowed his complaints. Very well, my lord. But we must hurry to reach the outpost by nightfall. We will maintain speed, I said. Richter, Brendan, spread your men to the flanks. Roland, organize the convoy. Move. My men moved with a discipline that silenced the mercenaries. Barton's skepticism faded slightly. We set off. We surrounded the convoy, scouts ahead, flanks secured, a textbook defensive formation. The mercenaries whispered, mocking my nervousness, thinking me a sheltered noble. They didn't understand. This was necessary. I gripped my sword hilt, scanning the thickening woods. Split Rock Canyon was ahead. The hungry kobolds were waiting. 1 kilometer from the canyon, I raised a hand, halting the column. All eyes turned to me. I turned to Richter and Brendan. Take all combat soldiers, my 24 and your 30, and wait here for 30 minutes. Then follow at a distance. Do not get too close, but do not fall too far behind. Even Brendan and Roland looked stunned. Richter protested, My lord? If the main force stays back, what is the point? If we are attacked, the convoy and your small guard won't stand a chance. He didn't need to finish. He meant we would be slaughtered. I stared him down. That is an order, Captain. You are here to assist me, not question my decisions. Richter stiffened, then saluted. As you command. His frustration was palpable. He clearly thought I was playing with lives. Brendan, however, seemed to grasp my intent. He nodded slowly. Understood, my lord. We will depart on time. I turned to Roland and my 12 auxiliaries. Let's go. Follow the convoy. I didn't even send scouts ahead. I simply caught up to the confused convoy. My lord, where are your troops? Barton asked. They will arrive shortly. We move on, I replied. Barton frowned but urged his team forward. The road narrowed into the steep, craggy entrance of Split Rock Canyon. The atmosphere grew heavy. Prepare for combat, I whispered. Watch the high ground. I dismounted. A horse was too big a target in the canyon. I donned my chainmail and a worn kettle hat. My full plate was too heavy for this ambush. It would drain my stamina and kill my mobility. Chainmail and a kettle hat were the better choice. I sent an auxiliary back to Richter and Brendan. Tell them we are entering the danger zone. Prepare to engage. My transport guards finally sensed something amiss, their casual demeanor vanishing as they gripped their weapons and scanned the surroundings with newfound vigilance. Merged with 487, the canyon's whistling wind now seemed to carry an eerie, rustling undertone. My heart hammered, not from fear, but from a mix of adrenaline and tension. My plan was risky. If my main force escorted the convoy openly, the kobold scouts would flee, preventing the combat demonstration I needed to show Count Rockefort. I had to bait them with my small detachment, drawing them out for my elite combat soldiers to encircle and annihilate. The danger lay in whether my bait could withstand the initial assault until reinforcements arrived. I didn't know if the kobolds' numbers or ferocity would exceed our capacity to hold. The canyon path grew rugged and dim. I gripped my lit matchlock, scanning every rock and thicket for hidden enemies. The kobolds didn't keep us waiting long. 10 minutes after I ordered battle readiness, a shrill howl erupted from above, followed by the whistle of projectiles. A volley of bone and iron-tipped arrows rained down. Enemy attack. Shields up. I roared, ducking instinctively. The arrows struck home, drawing immediate screams. My unprotected laborers and guards took the brunt of it. 4 or 5 fell instantly. A soldier's shoulder was pierced, and a stray arrow struck my helmet, the impact ringing in my ears. A close call. My pack horse, struck in the rump, bolted and threw its handler, charging blindly forward. The disaster had only begun. A thunderous roar echoed from above as massive rocks and logs were pushed down, crashing onto the path. Dust and debris filled the air, sealing the road ahead. The panicked horse was crushed instantly by a falling boulder. Our retreat was open, but our path forward was blocked, and the real attack began. Dozens of figures swarmed from the slopes, howling wildly. They charged like a tide, brandishing rusted blades, axes, and slings. I finally saw the kobolds clearly. They possessed human-like limbs but twisted, canine-like faces with protruding muzzles, bared fangs, and wild, murky eyes, a grotesque, blasphemous sight. They moved with a beastly, hunched agility. Sanity draining. I muttered, suppressing my nausea. This was no time for biology. Musketeers. Front slope. Fire. I aimed my matchlock at a hulking leader wielding an axe and pulled the trigger. The blast echoed, and the leader collapsed with a chest wound, disbelief in his eyes. The shot boosted morale. My other musketeers fired, albeit shakily. A few more kobolds fell, momentarily checking their charge. Drop guns. Form up. I drew my sword, shouting orders to organize our spears and shields. Our brief training paid off. Under my and Roland's shouts, the panicked men instinctively formed our practiced defensive line. Guards raised shields while my soldiers thrust spears through the gaps, creating a bristling wall. Musketeers and archers scrambled to reload behind the front line. The kobolds slammed into us, their attack chaotic but ferociously suicidal. They swarmed from all sides, clawing and biting. A guard screamed as his shield shattered, and a kobold tore into his throat. A gap opened. Plug it. Roland left. I parried a blade and skewered a kobold, blood splattering my face. Roland roared, his knightly sword glowing with faint battle chi as he swept two enemies back, stabilizing the flank. Still, we were outnumbered, 60 or 70 strong, and our inexperienced men were suffering. Our formation was shrinking, nearly overwhelmed. My arms ached, my chainmail was scored, and my helmet was dented. I panicked. Had I overplayed my hand? Just as the line buckled, a thunderous roar echoed from the rear. For France City. Kill. For Lord Carl. Brendan and Richter led 54 fresh, well-equipped combat soldiers in a steel-clad charge. They struck perfectly, catching the kobolds with their backs turned. Our veteran spears turned the rearguard kobolds into pincushions, cutting through the monsters with ease. Reinforcements are here. Counterattack. Kill them all. I bellowed. My men surged forward, catching the confused kobolds in a pincer. The enemy's assault collapsed, and they turned to flee. But the canyon was a trap. With no escape, the battle turned into a slaughter. The cleanup didn't last long. When Brendan's thrown axe felled the last fleeing kobold, silence returned to Split Rock Canyon, save for the moans of the wounded. My men began clearing the field, finishing off the dying and scavenging iron from the kobolds' crude weapons. I kicked a corpse aside, my family sword slick with gore. Remembering the old knight's advice, I prepared to clean the blade to prevent rust. I exhaled, my adrenaline fading into exhaustion, and stood tall to survey the field. Brendan and Richter approached, their faces bearing complex expressions. Brendan knelt, his heavy armor clattering against the ground. "My Lord Carl, forgive me," he said, head bowed in shame. "My late arrival nearly cost you and your men everything. Please, punish me." Richter followed suit, his voice heavy with regret. "My lord, I failed to grasp your tactical intent and acted too slowly. I deserve your judgment." Both men felt a mix of lingering terror and profound respect. They realized that had they arrived minutes later, my small force would have been annihilated by the kobolds. They were awestruck that I had used myself as bait, accurately predicting the ambush. Such decisiveness and tactical mastery were far beyond what anyone expected from a useless noble. I stepped forward, using my free hand to help them up. "Rise, Brendan, Captain Richter," I said, my voice weary but devoid of blame. "You arrived at the perfect moment. Any earlier, the kobolds might have fled. Any later, we would have fallen. The result is what matters. We won and wiped out the enemy." I patted Brendan's armor and smiled at Richter. "Tactics require flexibility. Your ability to execute my orders instantly is what truly counts. There is no sin here." My reassurance left them deeply moved. They realized their young lord possessed not only ability, but also the magnanimity to win hearts. Richter stood, speaking sincerely. "My lord, I see now. You employed a classic but dangerous lure tactic. I have read of it in manuals, but you are the first noble officer I've seen brave enough to lead a weak force as bait and hold your nerve until the perfect moment. It was merely a desperate necessity, I replied, deflecting the praise. I knew well that without the system's intelligence, I would never have risked such a maneuver. The casualty report arrived. We lost 4 guards, with 2 others, an auxiliary and a guard, severely wounded, and over a dozen lightly injured. All 70 to 80 kobolds were annihilated. The cargo remained intact, save for 1 overturned cart of leather. It was a brilliant victory, wiping out a superior ambush force with minimal losses. As the news spread, the survivors, my auxiliaries, the guards, and Richter's men erupted in cheers. Their gazes toward me shifted from skepticism to genuine respect, trust, and even fanaticism. Following a lord who could plan, fight, and win made the future seem far less bleak. Hearing their cheers and seeing the hope in their eyes, I felt a profound sense of accomplishment and responsibility. This was my first true victory in this world. Roland, the knight, approached. My lord, one of the severely wounded is failing. I hurried to the makeshift infirmary, where the air reeked of blood and medicinal powder. 2 men lay on straw. One had a deep abdominal wound. Though pale, he remained conscious and tried to salute me. A medic whispered, "He lost much blood, but his organs are intact. He will survive with rest." I nodded and turned to the second man. His condition was dire. A kobold stone axe had nearly severed his shoulder, exposing bone and shattered clavicle. His breathing was shallow, his face gray. "My lord," the medic sighed, "he is beyond our help." The surrounding soldiers gathered, their faces heavy with grief. In the Northern Territory, such a wound was a death sentence. I knelt, examined the injury, and made a difficult decision. To the shock of all, I removed my dented butterfly helmet and unbuckled my chainmail. From inside my tunic, I retrieved a small, oil paper-wrapped packet. Inside were glowing white crystals with a strange, clean fragrance. I poured the powder into my water flask and shook it until the water turned cloudy and fragrant. I lifted the dying soldier's head. "Drink, brother. Hold on." Driven by instinct, he swallowed a few mouthfuls. A miracle occurred. His color returned instantly. His breathing deepened, and the edges of his horrific wound began to knit together as the bleeding stopped. While not fully healed, he was clearly pulled back from the brink of death. "The goddess's mercy," the medic murmured, stunned. Brendan stared, his voice trembling. "My lord, is that a high-grade healing potion?" "Such potency." I handed the flask to the medic and began redonning my armor. "It is powdered high-grade healing potion crystals. Slower than the liquid, but easier to carry. It was one of my family's final, precious trump cards." Brendan hesitated, then whispered, "But my lord, to use something so precious on a common soldier." He implied the cost was too high. To most nobles, a soldier's life was worth less than the potion. I finished armoring myself and looked around. Every soldier watched me with disbelief and awe. I took a breath, my voice ringing out clearly. There is no but. In my ranks, every warrior who fights for me and trusts their comrade with their back is priceless. I will never abandon anyone. You are not expendable resources. You are the foundation of my future in the North and my brothers. Your lives are precious. My words echoed through the silent canyon. The soldiers' breathing hitched. They looked at me as if seeing me for the first time. They were commoners and serfs who had never been valued by a noble. Today, they had seen their lord sacrifice a priceless treasure to save one of their own and heard his declaration. One by one, they knelt, until the entire force bowed their heads to me. "We pledge our lives to you, my lord." Brendan and Roland roared. The deafening chorus of loyalty that followed sealed my command over them. I prepared to order the cleanup and the return to France City. Barton, the transport captain, approached, his previous arrogance replaced by humble reverence. He bowed deeply. "My Lord Carl, please, I beg you, escort us all the way to Black Crow Outpost. After what happened, we are terrified. We cannot handle another ambush alone." He was completely broken and desperate for my protection. I weighed our fatigue against the distance. Black Crow Outpost was closer than France City. We would rest there for the night before returning. I nodded, agreed. We will escort you to Black Crow Outpost. Thank you, my lord. Barton wept with relief. I turned to my men, who now followed my every word. Clear the field, recover our fallen, and gather the loot. We marched for Black Crow Outpost. We set off again, the atmosphere transformed. A unit forged in loyalty and shared purpose pushed deeper into the north. Inspired by victory and my reminder of their worth, the men moved faster despite the burden of the wounded and the dead. By 3 p.m., 2 hours ahead of schedule, we reached Black Crow Outpost. The outpost sat on a rise, its log-in stone walls flying the Plantagenet banner and the black raven flag of the northern province, snapping in the cold wind. Sentries spotted our large group and sounded the alarm. As we arrived at the gates, the outpost captain and his men stood ready, braced for a threat. They stared at us in shock. We were a sight: 70 battle-worn soldiers, 5 supply wagons, stretchers bearing the wounded and dead, and a cart carrying a mangled, headless horse. Barton? What happened? The captain asked, bewildered. This was just a supply run. Why the casualties? A routine transport shouldn't look like a war zone. Barton sighed. Old Jack, don't ask. We were ambushed in Split Rock Canyon by 70 or 80 kobolds. If not for Lord Carl's timely intervention, we'd be kobold dumb. He recounted the battle, emphasizing my leadership. The guards turned pale, looking at me and my blood-stained, sharp-eyed men with newfound awe. In the northern frontier, strength and merit are the only currency that matters. I stepped forward. Captain, my men are exhausted from battle and a forced march. May we? Barton interrupted, thumping his chest. Old Jack, Lord Carl saved my life. Bring out the best food. Feed them well, and put it on my tab. He was desperate to show his gratitude. Old Jack didn't hesitate. You heard him. Start the fires. Use the white flour, butter, and smoked meat. Stew that dead horse. Clear the largest barracks for Lord Carl's men. The outpost sprang to life, fires roaring under large pots. Flour was quickly kneaded into large, fragrant rye loaves. Precious butter melted into the hot bread, filling the air with a rich aroma. Smoked pork and horse meat simmered, the scent of meat permeating the camp. My men and the city guard were ushered into the barracks, handed hot bread and stew. Every soldier received a hearty portion of meat and bread. They sat together, sharing food and what little wine they had. The previous barriers had vanished. They were now a single, unified band of brothers. Meanwhile, a small feast was prepared in the commander's quarters. The table held roasted river fish, smoked meats, sausages, horse stew, fresh white bread, honey, and cheese. A bottle of wine sat in the center, a rare luxury in this frozen land. The station commander, myself, Richter, Brendan, Roland, and Barton sat down. The commander raised his cup. Lord Carl, the outpost is humble, but I thank you for saving the supplies. To your bravery. He was sincere. Losing these winter supplies would have ruined him. I raised my cup, feeling satisfied. Commander, hot food and shelter are more than enough. We only did what was necessary. We drank. The wine was rough but warming, perfect for the biting northern cold. Barton recounted the battle again, earning me more toasts from the commander. Richter and Brendan added details, praising my command. It was a simple meal, but the camaraderie suited us better than any royal banquet. Once full, exhaustion hit me like a tide. I was shown to the best guest room, a clean bed in a wind-tight room. I collapsed onto the pillow, fully clothed, and fell instantly into a deep sleep. The day's planning, combat, speeches, and marching had drained me. I slept soundly, the howling northern wind unable to disturb me. The next morning, I woke to bright light and the sound of soldiers and clattering dishes outside. I sat up, rubbing my temples. The wine and fatigue had caused me to oversleep. Sleeping in, I chuckled, realizing I hadn't even removed my boots. I splashed cold water on my face, straightened my armor, and stepped outside. The soldiers were eating breakfast, rye bread and stew, in the yard. To my surprise, everything was packed and ready, as if they were just waiting for me. Brendan and Richter approached. My lord, Brendan said apologetically, we let you sleep because you were so exhausted. Please forgive us for acting without orders. Richter nodded in agreement. I smiled and clapped them on the shoulders. Forgive you? You did well. I looked at the waiting soldiers. I want subordinates who think and act, not puppets. I am not a god. I cannot foresee everything. Having capable men like you is my fortune. They visibly relaxed, clearly moved by my trust. This lord's mindset is truly unconventional. I joined the soldiers for a simple, hearty breakfast. Before departing Black Crow Outpost, I led the off-duty soldiers to a secluded area behind the station where graves had been dug. For bodies, wrapped in white cloth, lay by the pits, the transport guards lost in yesterday's battle. Barton informed me that 2 had families. Their remains were cremated to be sent home with pensions. The other 2 were wandering mercenaries with no kin. I decided to hold a funeral for them. The soldiers stood in silent mourning as the bodies were lowered. I stood before the graves, my voice steady. These 4 warriors were not my direct subordinates, but they fought with fearless courage until their final breath. Their sacrifice bought us the time and space to counterattack. Without them, many of us, myself included, might not be standing here. I scanned their solemn faces. They may have no family to remember them, but their deeds shall not be forgotten. This outpost, the land they died defending, is now their resting place. Their names will be carved on this stone. I gestured to a smooth stone slab where the scribe had engraved their names, Tom Smith and Will Carter. Below them were the words, "Fell in the Battle of Split Rock Canyon." Attention! I straightened my posture, my voice rising. Salute our heroic martyrs. Instantly, every soldier, my own, Richter's city guard, and the outpost guards, snapped into a standard military salute. Silence fell, broken only by the whistling northern wind. Young Knight Roland looked on, eyes reddening, his fists clenched. To follow a lord who respects every soldier, dying on the battlefield would be worth it. The ceremony concluded, the earth covered the heroes, and the stone stood as a silent testament. A weight lifted from my heart. After bidding farewell to the grateful outpost commander and Barton, I led my revitalized, cohesive unit back toward Friend City. Sunlight stretched our shadows. The troops' morale had been transformed, becoming resilient and unified. I knew that through blood, fire, and today's funeral, the soul of this army had been forged. On the road, the system updated. Daily task updated. Task: report the battle results to Count Rockefort. Incomplete. Due to our late start, we didn't reach Friend City until the afternoon. I ordered Roland and Brendan to return to the barracks, and Richter to report to his post. I walked alone to the cold governor's mansion, where the same aloof scribe received me. I tried to gauge the Count's mood, but the scribe remained tight-lipped. The Count is working, go directly in. With no information, I steeled myself and followed him to the office. I was relieved he wasn't with a mistress, which might have soured his mood. Surprisingly, the scribe led me straight inside without making me wait. This small change in treatment made me wonder. Has the Count gained some basic trust in me? Count Rockefort sat behind his oak desk, frowning at a list while discussing weapon and grain reserves with the quartermaster. I stood quietly by the door. He appeared sharp and focused, a stark contrast to his usual hedonistic bureaucrat persona. One does not hold the position of governor of the North by being a fool. He ignored me, perhaps intentionally. I stood for half an hour until he dismissed the quartermaster. Then he finally glanced at me coldly. "Is it done?" he asked, his tone unreadable. I stood straight. "Yes, my lord. The transport arrived safely, supplies are intact, and the kobolds were wiped out. Estimated 70 to 80. And then, he leaned back, eyes sharp. "Does Black Crow Outpost hold your lover? Why linger there instead of returning?" I looked embarrassed. "My lord, that is not the case. If not," he slammed his hand on the desk, startling me. His face turned icy. "Then why not report immediately? I sent 5 scouting parties fearing you were wiped out. Even if you secured the transport, you should have sent a runner. That is basic discipline," the scribe added softly. The Count was very worried. I bowed my head. "My apologies, my lord. I was preoccupied with post-battle matters and neglected the report. Please punish me. I had indeed forgotten, lost in the joy of victory." Seeing my sincerity, his anger cooled, though he remained stern. "Since it is your first offense and the mission was well executed, I will let it pass. Do not delay military intelligence again. Now, describe the battle." A knock sounded at the door. "Enter," he replied. Captain Richter entered to report on the city guard. The Count pointed at him. "Richter, you were there. Tell me the details." Richter, eager to speak, began his account. He described my early arrival at the docks, the strategy of splitting forces, my decision to act as bait, the desperate defense in the canyon, and our final pincer attack. He painted me as a brilliant, courageous young commander. The Count's icy expression melted into surprise and curiosity as he looked at me. After Richter finished, the Count spoke slowly. "Luring the enemy, acting as bait, staying calm under pressure. I have discovered another talent of yours, Karl von Schmidt. Have you been playing the fool in the royal capital for a decade, deceiving everyone, including your Duke father, just to be exiled to the north to show off your skills?" The question was sharp, probing. I kept my composure. "You overpraise me, my lord." It was not a disguise. The North's harshness and danger ignited my spirit. "I enjoy it here and admire your pragmatic leadership." I added a subtle compliment. The Count scoffed. "Enough flattery. The mission was well done. By custom, you may request a reward, provided it is reasonable." As he spoke, the system chimed. "Task: report the battle results to Count Rockefort." Completed. Reward: the Count is satisfied and intends to permanently assign Captain Richter and his 30 veteran guards to your command. Richter himself desires to follow you rather than remain in France City. I suppressed my excitement as I asked Count Rockefort to transfer Richter and his 30 soldiers to my command in Confort. They were the seasoned backbone I desperately needed to defend the frontier. Count Rockefort glanced at Richter, who looked pleasantly surprised, and offered a subtle, knowing smile. "Granted," he replied. As I stepped out of the governor's mansion with Richter, the cold air felt invigorating. Richter clapped my shoulder in his excitement before catching himself. "My lord, I never expected you to actually ask for us. I'm honored to fight by your side again." I chuckled. "What else would I ask for? Beauty or gold?" Richter laughed. "Those aren't exactly scarce for a duke's son like you." I looked toward the barracks, my tone turning serious. "Those aren't what I want. The northern frontier makes me feel truly alive. The challenges and the comrades here are worth more than anything in the royal capital." I turned to him. "But why would you leave the safety of France City for the dangers of Confort?" Richter's expression turned bittersweet. "I lack your pedigree, my lord. My father was a fallen knight. I inherited nothing but a hollow name and my strength. I don't want to be a gatekeeper forever. I want to earn my own knighthood, and I believe following you is my best chance." I nodded solemnly. "Fight with me, Richter, and you shall have your knighthood." Richter's eyes lit up, then dimmed with worry. "My lord, I am willing, but my 30 veterans may hesitate. They have families in France City. Leaving the safety of the city to face the Solon barbarians in Confort is a heavy request." He sighed. "Staying here means safety and time with their families, even if there's no glory." I smiled confidently. "I understand. Bring them to my barracks. I will convince them." Richter nodded and went to gather his men. I returned to the barracks and ordered Brendan to assemble everyone. My soldiers quickly formed up on the training ground. Their formation was imperfect, but their spirits were high, filled with trust. Richter's veterans arrived, watching curiously as they stood at the edge of the field. I scanned my men and shouted, "Brothers, remember what I promised." The soldiers' eyes brightened. "I promised pay and rewards for your valor." Roland and the attendants brought out heavy sacks and dropped them with a thud. The bags opened to reveal piles of gold and silver coins. "Now I fulfill my promise. Step forward to receive your pay." Brendan called the names, and the men stepped up. I personally handed out the silver coins, 1.5 for combat soldiers, 1 for auxiliaries. Their hands trembled as they accepted the coins, their faces beaming with disbelief. This was more than just wealth. It was proof of my word. "Thank you, my lord. We will die for you," they cried out. Richter's veterans watched in stunned silence. They had never seen pay distributed so promptly, let alone by a lord's own hand. The pay was higher than what they received in the city guard, and envy flickered in their eyes. The excitement was palpable. I raised my voice again. "That was your pay? Now, for the extra rewards for your bravery at Split Rock Canyon." I held up the merit list prepared by Brendan and Roland. "Every participant receives an additional 5 silver coins." A cheer erupted. I began calling out those who stood out, mostly the auxiliaries who held the front line. Eddie, you held the left flank and killed 2 kobolds alone. 10 silver coins. Eddie, a young auxiliary, stumbled forward, trembling as he accepted the coins. I patted his shoulder. Well done, lad. Peter, you fought without retreat and protected your comrades despite 3 wounds. 8 silver coins and 5 for medical compensation. Peter's eyes welled up as he hobbled forward. My lord, I steadied him. Your courage was seen by all. Rest well. Each man received more than expected and a sincere word of encouragement. The training ground was electric with gratitude. Many soldiers saluted me with tears in their eyes. Richter and his men were completely floored. They had never imagined a lord like this. Immediate, generous rewards after a battle were unheard of. I knew every man's name and his specific contribution. This shattered their perception of nobility. Seeing my men's loyalty, they compared it to their own meager, often delayed pay. A fire ignited within them. Why settle for safety when they could follow a generous, brave leader to glory and a better life for their families? Conford didn't seem so terrifying anymore. I turned my gaze toward the veterans standing at the edge of the field. I walked toward them, meeting their weathered faces, now filled with longing and awe. You aren't my direct subordinates, I told the soldiers, but we bled together at Stonesplit Canyon. Your discipline and courage deserve recognition. I signaled Roland, who stepped forward with a heavy coin purse. I grabbed handfuls of silver coins. Every city guard who fought yesterday receives 5 silver coins as a reward for your valor. The veterans were stunned. I walked to the first man and pressed the coins into his calloused palm. His hand trembled. My lord, this is... You earned it, I said, moving to the next man. I placed 5 coins into every shaking hand. As they looked at the silver and then at me, their hesitation vanished, replaced by gratitude. This bonus was worth months of pay. I stepped back, my expression turning solemn. By Count Rockefeller's order, you and Captain Richter are now under my command. You will accompany me to Conford. Though Richter had hinted at this, my official announcement caused a stir. I let the silence settle before continuing. You know Conford. It is the northern frontier's front line, the first target for the Solon barbarians. There are no high walls or large garrisons there. Only ruins, danger, and the constant shadow of death. I scanned their faces. If you fear death or prefer the comfort of France City, step forward now. Keep the 5 silver coins and return to your original units. I will explain everything to Count Rockefeller myself. The parade ground fell silent, save for the whistling wind. It was a brutal choice, the known safety of the city versus the lethal uncertainty of the frontier. I didn't let them dwell on it. But if you choose to stay, to trust me, Karl von Schmidt, I make a vow. I raise my arm. If I have food, you will not go hungry. If I have gold, you will be rewarded. Your pay will be higher and on time. If you are wounded, I will see you healed. If you fall in battle, your families will receive 10 times the standard pension and be supported by my territory for life. I don't offer empty words of glory. I offer wealth, dignity, and a future. We go to Conford not to die, but to carve out our own land with the blood of our enemies. My words ignited their blood. Why settle for meager pay and a dead-end life? They needed no more convincing. 30 veterans and Captain Richter slammed their heels together and struck their breastplates in unison. No one stepped forward. No one returned the silver. Their eyes burned with resolve as they roared. We live and die for you, my lord. We follow you. Through fire and water. The sound shattered the northern chill. I had my core force. I nodded, satisfied. The journey to Conford had begun. I gave the new soldiers a day to settle their affairs. I spent my time at the slave market with Brendan, Roland, and Old Mall, seeking labor for the reconstruction. My soldiers alone couldn't rebuild Conford. The system chimed. Daily task updated. Task: purchase 100 slaves. I currently had 70 soldiers. Managing 3 to 4 slaves per soldier was safe, meaning I could handle up to 300. The market was a cacophony of desperate cries. I ignored the rebellious types, seeking those enslaved by debt or minor crimes, people who knew how to work. Male slaves cost 8 silver, females 4. Men were the primary labor force. However, 300 resentful men would be a powder keg. I needed women to stabilize the group, fostering internal competition and family bonds to prevent riots. Families would make the men more compliant. I purchased 270 sturdy men and 30 healthy women. It cost nearly 300 gold coins, but it was a necessary investment. Old Maul proved invaluable during the selection. He recognized several faces in the crowd. They were former engineers and craftsmen from Confort, enslaved after the fortress fell. My lord, that's Hans, the best stonemason. And Wally, a master of timber. That's Firth, an expert in waterworks. I immediately bought their freedom. They looked at me with a mix of gratitude, confusion, and fear. When they heard I intended to rebuild Confort, they looked horrified. My lord, Confort has fallen 3 times already, Hans croaked. Old Maul grabbed his shoulder. Hans, Wally, Firth, this is different. Lord Carl is not like the others. He respects our craft and trusts us. Do you want to rot in this cage? The craftsmen exchanged looks and nodded. A lord who valued them was better than slavery. Hans, Wally, Firth, I declared, you are no longer slaves. You are engineering consultants for Confort. I want your expertise to rebuild our home. They wept with relief and bowed in loyalty. Task: purchase 100 slaves, complete. Reward: intelligence received. A private caravan in the Camel Bell market is selling Breath of the North Wind, a magical crystal powder from the far north that helps low-tier knights stabilize their battle chi and break through bottlenecks. My eyes lit up. Brendan and Roland were stuck at the first tier. This was exactly what they needed. Richter, take the slaves to the barracks and feed them well, but keep them under strict guard. Brendan, Roland, come with me. Yes, my lord. Richter began organizing the slaves. I headed to the South District's Camel Bell Market with my men. It was a hub for traveling merchants. We found the caravan tucked away in a quiet corner. The caravan leader, seeing our fine attire, greeted us with immediate enthusiasm. I skipped the pleasantries and asked, I hear you have Breath of the North Wind. His expression shifted. He scanned the surroundings before whispering, You're well informed. I have some, but it isn't cheap. Show me. If the quality is genuine, the price is no issue, I replied calmly. He retrieved a small leather pouch from a pack. Inside was a shimmering, icy blue powder that radiated a pure, cooling energy. Brendan and Roland gasped, their eyes burning with desire. They knew this would break their stagnant battle chi bottleneck. 15 gold coins, the leader demanded. I nodded to Brendan without hesitation. Though it pained him, Brendan paid the sum, the equivalent of 20 slaves. I took the powder and, under their expectant gazes, divided it between them. Brendan, Roland, I said sincerely, you are my most trusted knights. Your strength is vital to our territory's future. Consider this my investment in you. Seeing my lack of hesitation, they were overwhelmed with loyalty. They hadn't expected such generosity for such rare resources. Kneeling, they took the powder with trembling hands. My lord, we swear our lives and loyalty to you. We will not fail you. I helped them up. Go, refine it. Conford needs your strength. After settling our logistics, I sent them off and returned to the governor's mansion. I needed to bid farewell to Count Rockefort before leaving for my territory tomorrow. A more cordial official greeted me this time. I stated my intent. Please inform the Count that Karl von Schmidt is departing for Conford tomorrow. He nodded and led me to a waiting room. I wondered if I'd interrupt the Count's private time again. Thankfully, the official returned shortly. The Count will see you now. I adjusted my gear and followed him. He opened the heavy oak doors for me. I stepped inside, and the door clicked shut. Count Rockefort sat at his desk, his scribe nearby. A young woman stood beside him. She had golden, sun-kissed curls tied back. Her features were refined, balancing elegance with a sharp, heroic edge. Her blue eyes mirrored the Count's. She appeared to be about 18. Dressed in a shirt, trousers, and leather vest, she wore dusty riding boots, looking as if she'd just arrived from the field. She was tall, nearly matching my height. Her gaze, sharp and predatory, swept over me, making me feel strangely self-conscious. I instinctively looked away. Rockefort smirked, tapping the desk. Charlotte, meet Karl von Schmidt, the most useless son of Duke Schmidt. He claims to have wiped out a group of kobolds with a ragtag squad. Sounds like a bard's tale, doesn't it? Charlotte's gaze intensified, a faint smile touching her lips. I lowered my head, embarrassed. The Count is too kind. It was merely luck. Luck? Rockefort scoffed. In the north, where a goblin brawl becomes a legion battle, your feat is noteworthy enough. I stepped forward, ignoring the jab. Count, my troops are ready. We depart for Conford tomorrow. Thank you for your hospitality. Rockefort looked surprised. Tomorrow? The others are still squandering their coin in the taverns. You're in such a rush to freeze in that wasteland. I stood tall. We were sent to secure the frontier, not to rot in France City. The sooner we leave, the sooner we can ease your burden. He chuckled. Noble ideals. I hope your territory is tough enough to break the Solonians' teeth when they raid next autumn. I'll see you off tomorrow. He turned to the girl. Charlotte, you may go. Yes, father, she replied crisply. We exited together, the heavy door closing behind us. The corridor echoed with the rhythmic tap-tap of her boots. The sound resonated in my chest. She walked with a soldier's precision, yet moved with graceful fluidity. Her golden hair swayed, brushing against my senses. I was struck by her presence, but didn't know how to break the silence. We walked in silence until we reached the cold night air outside. The city was dark, but her presence made the world feel brighter. I expected us to part ways, feeling a tinge of regret. Just as I prepared to say goodbye, she stopped. She turned, her icy blue eyes locking onto mine. Carl. Schmidt, right? I blurted out. Yes. What is it? A flicker of anticipation rose within me. Her expression remained sharp. Where are your troops? Can I see them? I was stunned. Now. She raised an eyebrow. Unless they dissolve at night and reassemble at dawn? I don't believe such a force could have ambushed 70 kobolds. I was speechless, realizing she was undoubtedly Rockefort's daughter. We share the same penchant for sarcastic, hyperbolic wit. I smiled, my tension easing. My troops are at the city guard barracks. You're welcome to inspect them if you wish. I gestured for her to lead. Lead the way, Charlotte replied concisely. Suppressing a flutter of excitement, I led my distinguished guest toward the barracks. I wondered if her interest was genuine, or if she simply sought an excuse to spend time with me. Regardless, having the Northern Rose inspect my elite troops was a positive development. We walked through the silent streets of France City toward the barracks. The cold wind blew between us. The silence was thick with a new, subtle tension. I could hear my own heartbeat, and glancing at her silhouette in the moonlight, I felt an undeniable thrill. As we neared the perimeter, 2 sentries emerged from the shadows, blocking our path. Halt. Password. I froze, momentarily speechless. I had been busy all day. Brendan and Richter handled the night watch, and I didn't know the password. Seeing my hesitation, the sentries drew their swords, the blades glinting in the dim light. I felt Charlotte's gaze on me, filled with curiosity and a hint of amusement. Flushing, I stepped forward and whispered, It's me, Carl. The sentries hesitated, then one raised his torch, illuminating my face. My lord, they gasped, sheathing their swords and dropping to one knee. Forgive us, we didn't recognize you. I sighed in relief, but kept my expression stern. Rise. You did your duty by challenging us, I said firmly. They stood, looking uneasy. However, I continued, my tone sharpening. You failed afterward. You let me pass just because you recognized my voice. If an enemy had mimicked me, the entire camp would be compromised. The sentries paled, realizing the gravity of their error. You deserve punishment, I said, pausing to let the tension sink in. But since you are diligent, I will let this slide. Remember, at night, you obey the password, not the person. Even if it's me, no password means no entry. Understood. Understood. Thank you, my lord, they shouted, relieved and ashamed. Resume your posts, I said, leading Charlotte past them. After a few steps, Charlotte spoke, her voice clear in the night. Obeying the password over the person, even for yourself. I have a good feeling about this, Carl von Schmidt. I think I might truly see a unique army here. I felt a surge of pride, but remained humble. You're too kind, Charlotte. They are new recruits with many flaws. I simply invest in their equipment and pay to ensure their loyalty. She smiled, her eyes reflecting the starlight. That sounds simple, but 90% of commanders in the kingdom can't, or won't, do it. We encountered another patrol, but I knew the password this time, and they saluted us through. Charlotte's respect for me clearly deepened. I was pleased that Brendan and Richter had maintained such discipline in my absence. We soon reached the barracks. Despite the hour, patrols and sentries were active and orderly. "This is my entire force," I said, gesturing to the camp with a mix of pride and a desire for her approval. Charlotte stopped, looked at the camp, and then turned to me. "How about an emergency night drill?" "What?" I blinked. "An emergency night drill," she repeated, handing me a whistle with a challenging look. "I want to see how your soldiers and officers react when you aren't there. Real armies don't sleep soundly just because it's dark." I hesitated. A night drill? They were exhausted from the day's training. Would this cause resentment? Yet she was right. Night raids would be a constant threat in Conford. Practicing was essential. Plus, she was watching me with such expectation. "Don't embarrass me, men," I thought. I took the whistle and said, "Very well. As you wish." I put the metal whistle to my lips and blew hard. The sharp, piercing sound cut through the silence like a blade. I strode toward the parade ground, shouting, "Emergency assembly. Everyone out. 5 minutes to gear up and assemble. Latecomers will be punished." The soldiers were jolted from their sleep by the terrifying noise. They sat up in confusion, the darkness filled with clattering gear and muffled curses. "What's happening? An attack? Assembly at this hour?" They were dazed, unsure how to react to such an unprecedented order. They scrambled in the dark, fumbling for leather armor and boots, creating a chaotic mess. That was when my officers proved their worth. Brendan, Roland, and Richter sprang into action instantly. They roared at their men. "Up! Get up! Emergency assembly! Move! Grab your weapons! Armor! Get outside! Don't dawdle!" Someone tried to light a lamp, but I barked, "Extinguish that light! No sources of light! Do you want to be a target?" An officer smashed the lamp, plunging the camp back into darkness, save for the faint moonlight. Soon, men began scrambling out of the barracks. Some wore only shirts, others had misaligned armor, and some were missing a boot. They poured out like a disturbed anthill, rushing toward the center of the parade ground. The camp was a chaotic scene of aimless running and desperate shouting from officers. Through the harsh, physical intervention of Brendan, Richter, and Roland, the mob finally began to take shape. The soldiers stood panting, their gear askew, faces still marked by sleep and terror. Regardless, they were all present and silent, save for the heavy breathing echoing in the night air. Brendan, having organized his combat soldiers first, reported to me, "My lord, 24 combat soldiers present and accounted for." Roland followed, nervous but mimicking the protocol. "My lord, 12 auxiliary soldiers present and accounted for." Richter, whose veteran city guards recovered fastest, reported, "My lord, 30 city guards present and accounted for." I scanned the disheveled but fully assembled ranks, feeling a sense of genuine satisfaction. This was an unpracticed drill. The results far exceeded my expectations. It proved that my investments, discipline, and officer selections were paying off. I maintained a cold expression and declared, "This was a drill, but remember this chaos. The enemy won't wait for you to dress. Night drills are now routine. Dismissed. Return to rest. Double the sentries." The soldiers returned to their barracks, whispering with a mix of relief and shame. As the officers stayed to debrief, Charlotte, who had been watching silently, approached. She looked at me, her eyes bright in the darkness, filled with clear appreciation. "To assemble everyone on time without warning is impressive, Karl von Schmidt," she said, her voice softening. "I may need to revise my expectations. You might actually hold out in the northern frontier." She paused, then asked casually, "Your territory is in Conford, right?" "Yes, Conford," I replied, my heart stirred by her change in attitude. She nodded, adding, "I'll keep that in mind. If I ever patrol that way, I will visit." Without waiting for a response, she turned and vanished into the night. I instinctively wanted to follow, but stopped myself. I stared at where she had stood, the faint scent of her hair lingering in the wind. I touched my pocket, feeling the cold metal whistle. I hadn't returned it. As I stood there, Richter startled me by appearing at my side. "A dazzling, thorny pearl of the north," Richter remarked, admiring the empty street. I glared at him. "You startled me. Do you know her?" I felt a mix of curiosity and defensive tension. Richter looked at me as if I were insane. My lord, that is Charlotte Rockefort, the Count's daughter. Everyone in France City knows her. She's always out patrolling or training. Is she the Count's eldest? I asked. Richter scratched his head. Second, I believe. She has an older brother. He lowered his voice. The Count's affairs are no secret, but he dotes on her. That's why she's allowed to carry arms and patrol. I nodded thoughtfully. Richter looked at me, surprised. Wait, you've only been here a few days. How do you know about his mistresses? I laughed. Which noble doesn't? My father, Schmidt, had so many mistresses and bastards he couldn't count them. That's how I earned the title of most useless son. At dawn, my force stood ready outside the north gate of France City. Nearly 50 soldiers stood in formation. Despite their mismatched gear, the recent battles had forged them into a cohesive unit. In the center, 300 slaves stood, their eyes numb with fear. The rear consisted of the auxiliary unit and a supply train of a dozen wagons. The crowd of France City residents watched in disbelief. They were used to pioneer nobles who drank, complained, or harassed the locals. Those soldiers were undisciplined until Count Rockefort executed a few to restore order. My men, however, were different. They stood silent and resolute, lacking the sloppiness of the others. They waited quietly, causing no trouble for the curious onlookers. This discipline was rare for the northern frontier. My soldiers stood taller, feeling a sense of pride. They were warriors earning respect, not common thugs. Count Rockefort arrived with his officials to see us off. He wore his usual inscrutable expression. Behind him stood Charlotte, dressed in leather armor and a cloak. She ignored the crowd, her gaze fixed on me. I wore my chainmail and butterfly helmet, scarred from the battle at Split Rock Canyon, which only added to my hardened appearance. The Count looked me over. So, the Dogslayer departs? I hope your armor stays intact in Conford and isn't split open by Solonian axes. I bowed slightly. I will do my best to ensure this armor takes enough hits to buy France City time. See that you do, the Count grunted. The north is cold and dangerous. Don't die too quickly and prove me wrong. I will heed your words, I replied. Charlotte stepped forward. Carl, be careful. I look forward to your good news. I felt a warmth in my chest. Thank you, Lady Charlotte. I pulled the metal whistle from my pocket. I forgot to return this yesterday. Charlotte smiled brightly. Keep it. A small gift. It might be useful in Conford. I was stunned, then carefully tucked the whistle away. Thank you. I wanted to offer a gift in return, but found myself embarrassed, having nothing suitable to give. Charlotte smiled. No need for a return gift. Just remember to invite me to your territory later. I promise, I replied earnestly. Once Cranford is secure, you are always welcome. After bidding farewell to Count Rockefort and the officials, I took a deep breath, mounted my horse, and turned toward the vast, unknown north. I signaled, move out. The heavy north gate of France City groaned open, revealing the desolate, frigid wilderness beyond. The column began to move. Soldiers marched steadily, slaves were prodded forward, and cart wheels crunched over the frozen earth. As I rode at the front, just before leaving the gate's shadow, I couldn't help but look back. Charlotte stood at the gate, her golden hair fluttering in the morning breeze. Seeing me look back, she waved. My resolve hardened. I turned away, spurred my horse, and joined the flow of my departing force. I was finally on the path to Cranford, toward the unknown. Inside the Drunken Badger Tavern, the atmosphere was unusually rowdy. Citizens and idlers, stirred by my departure, gathered to drink cheap ale and gossip about the young lord and his strange southern army. In a private room upstairs, the air was thick with smoke, alcohol, and cheap perfume. A group of young nobles sat around a greasy table. Among them were Lorenzo Visconti and Jasper Waters, second sons or distant relatives cast aside to the Northern Territory. They looked hungover and bored, surrounded by messy plates. Heard the news? Duke Schmidt's precious Carl put on a big show leaving this morning, Lorenzo sneered. Jasper poked a cold steak with his fork. What's the point? Taking a handful of men and slaves to a hellhole like Cranford? He's courting death. Count Rockefort wasn't seeing him off. He was seeing him to his grave. Keep it down, Fairchild warned, glancing at the door. He's still the Duke's son. So what? He's just like us. Dumped in this godforsaken place, Lorenzo grumbled. I hate his posturing. Training soldiers? Buying gear? Who is he trying to impress? Exactly, Jasper agreed. Why not just drink and find women like the rest of us instead of making us look like failures? The door creaked open, and a figure stumbled in. It was a man my age, handsome but pale, with deep dark circles and a disheveled silk shirt stained with lipstick. The group perked up, whistling and banging the table. The boss is here. Cyril, you're back. Cyril von Eichberg, another duke's son, was the leader of this circle due to his higher inheritance rank and reckless spending. Cyril slumped into the main seat, took a drink from an offered cup, and sighed. Lorenzo leaned in. How was it? Find a new target. Cyril smirked with condescension. This place is dirt poor. Any decent girl costs 2 silver coins, but he licked his lips. The northern women are wilder. They've got spirit. The group erupted in lewd laughter. Cyril's eyes drifted. The best prize in the north is Count Rockefeller's daughter, Charlotte. I saw her this morning. That body. I wonder if she's as arrogant in bed as she is in public. He continued with increasingly vulgar remarks. Lorenzo and Jasper's eyes lit up, while others laughed nervously, afraid to join in. Fantasizing about the Count's daughter was dangerous. They knew better than to cross that line. Jasper quickly changed the subject. Did you pick your territory at the governor's mansion yesterday? Cyril waved dismissively. My advisor handled it. Some peninsula in the southwest, I think. Easy to defend, or so they say. He added with disdain. The old man said Schmidt's boy picked a decent spot, but it's right on the path of the Sorin barbarians. Pure suicide. He really thinks he's a war hero. A malicious grin spread across his face. Let's make a bet. How long will our heroic Karl von Schmidt last at his graveyard in Cranford? The group was eager for entertainment. I bet he won't last until next autumn. Lorenzo shouted. The Sorin will crush him first. Jasper stroked his chin. Autumn? Too generous. I bet he's finished by summer. Maybe his own slaves will kill him. 3 months. 2 months. Cyril smiled, finished his drink, and slammed the glass onto the table. You're all too optimistic, Cyril said, his eyes cold. I bet he won't last a month. And he'll die a miserable, ugly death. By noon, my force stopped at the edge of a wooded area near a water source. Northern days were short. By early afternoon, the sky was already turning gray. I knew that outside the walls of France City, night meant extreme danger. We had to build a defensible camp before the light failed. The greatest threat was the Sorin. While it wasn't their main raiding season, the bulk of their forces having already retreated north. Scattered Sorin scouts and raiding parties still haunted the wilderness like ghosts. Even a small Sorin scout unit could be catastrophic for my current force. Beyond them, starving wolves, goblins, kobolds, and stranger things lurked. I issued orders, and camp construction began. Slaves were put to work felling trees under guard. The north, once home to 2 million, was now a wasteland due to constant war and Sorin massacres. With fewer humans, the forests had reclaimed the land, providing abundant timber. I implemented a simple system. Extra rye porridge for those who met their woodcutting quotas, and lashes for those who slacked off. In this wilderness, escape was suicide. Starvation or being eaten by beasts was the only alternative. The slaves worked with surprising efficiency, driven by the promise of meager food. 20 armed soldiers stood guard, effectively suppressing any thoughts of rebellion. The soldiers handled technical tasks like trenching, building embankments, and setting up camp. The slaves lacked the organization and skills for such work. Under the guidance of Old Moore and the rescued craftsmen, Hans, Wally, and Firth, the camp construction was orderly. Old Moore mapped the layout. Hans directed the earthworks, Wally managed the timber and fencing, and Firth planned the drainage and water access. Their professional expertise proved invaluable. By sunset, a functional camp stood on the wasteland. The perimeter featured a 2-meter-deep trench lined with sharpened stakes. Behind it sat a solid, meter-high earthen embankment reinforced with turf. Atop the embankment stood a sturdy wooden palisade, reinforced with thick logs. Inside, tents were arranged by function. Zones for soldiers, slaves, supplies, horses, and a temporary command post and infirmary were clearly defined. Fire pits were placed strategically for warmth and light without risking the tents. It was a proper military camp, far superior to the chaotic setups of typical expeditions. Watching the smoke rise and the fires flicker against the dark, imposing fortifications, the soldiers and even the numb slaves felt a sense of security. Standing on the embankment, I felt a surge of accomplishment and a growing reliance on Old Moore and the others. Professional talent is vital in the wilderness. Brendan doubled the sentries and patrols, placing scouts in the surrounding darkness. Roland inspected every inch of the defenses to ensure no gaps remained. As night fell over the northern frontier, the camp's fires burned brightly against the howling wind. At dawn, the camp stirred to life. The smell of cooking replaced the morning chill as everyone ate a simple breakfast of rye porridge and dried meat. We had to move quickly. I stood before my command tent, unfolding the map. Count Rockefort had gifted me this detailed map of the northern frontier, marking terrain, old roads, and hazards. I traced our route, noting we had covered 30 kilometers yesterday. For a group with slaves and supplies, this pace was elite by Plantagenet standards. My goal was Conford, 120 kilometers from France City, a distance I chose carefully. Too close meant being under the Count's thumb. Too far meant being isolated from support. 120 kilometers was the perfect balance. 3 or 4 more days, I estimated, putting the map away. We left the camp intact to serve as a future outpost, and the column prepared to depart. Suddenly, a commotion broke out in the soldiers' area. I hurried over to investigate. A soldier sat on the ground in agony, clutching his left foot. "What happened?" I asked. "It's Roderick, my lord," a soldier replied. A log rolled and crushed his foot. I knelt as the medic removed his boot. His ankle was swollen and bruised. He gasped in pain as the medic examined it. "It's likely a fracture, my lord," the medic reported. "He can't walk. We'll need a stretcher." Roderick paled, pleading, "No, my lord. I can walk. Don't let me slow the march." He tried to stand, but nearly fainted. Being a burden in the north was a death sentence. I remained silent for a moment. A stretcher would slow us down, but abandoning a man was out of the question. I made my choice. "No stretcher," I said firmly. "You'll take my horse." The soldiers stared in disbelief. "My lord, I couldn't." Roderick protested. "That's your mount." I cut him off. "Are you disobeying a direct order, soldier?" He straightened up, speechless. "What is your full name?" "Roderick Steadfast, my lord," he stammered. "Roderick Steadfast, I order you to ride until your foot heals." With his comrade's help, a grateful Roderick mounted my horse. A former farmer who joined the militia to pay for his mother's care, he had never ridden before. He clutched the reins, looking like he was in a dream, while the other soldiers watched with deep respect. They were no longer surprised by my actions, only grateful to serve a lord who cared for his men. I patted the horse's neck. "Hold tight, she's gentle." With the matter settled, I signaled the march. "Move out." The column wound its way into the desolate northern frontier. Brendan and Roland offered their horses, but I declined, walking alongside my men. Carrying a common soldier on my mount only strengthened my authority. We marched for hours in the oppressive silence of the wasteland. Brendan returned from scouting, looking grim. "The terrain is clear, my lord," he whispered. "But I have a bad feeling. I felt like we're being watched for the last half hour." The system's cold chime rang in my mind. Daily task updated. Task: establish a camp and build solid defenses. Incomplete. Brendan's intuition and the system aligned. Danger was near. We had to stop. I ordered the column to halt. Brendan's instinct is right. We stop here and build a fortified camp according to yesterday's standards. The long column halted. Though confused, no one questioned my command. With yesterday's experience and Old Moore's supervision, the camp rose faster and more efficiently. We dug deeper trenches, packed the earthworks tighter, and reinforced the palisades. I also overhauled my management of the 270 male slaves. I divided them into 9 squads of 30, intending to appoint temporary leaders. I walked into the group of slaves felling timber. I spotted a thin but agile middle-aged slave who worked diligently and helped others. "You come here." He froze, his face draining of color, eyes wide with terror. To him, being singled out by a lord meant only beatings or death. He trembled, pushed forward by his peers, and bowed his head, awaiting his doom. My voice was calm, even encouraging. "Look up. You work hard and cooperate well. What is your name? He looked up, stammering, "And my lord, I am Otto. Otto, from today, you are the squad leader. You are exempt from heavy labor. Your job is to supervise these 30 men. Your rations are increased to 2 bowls of rye porridge." Otto stared, stunned, as if hearing a miracle. The surrounding slaves stopped, watching in disbelief. After a long silence, joy replaced his fear. He knelt, sobbing. "Thank you, my lord. I will not let you down." I signaled him to rise. "Work well. If you perform, I will eventually reward you with a wife from the female slaves so you can start a family." The announcement sent a shockwave through the slaves. The prospect of a family, a concept they had long abandoned, was an unimaginable grace. Otto returned to his squad, weeping with gratitude. He stood tall, shouting orders with newfound vigor, and the squad's efficiency soared. I seized the moment to address all the slaves. "You see? Work hard and obey, and you earn food, status, even a family. The opportunity is in your hands." For the first time, the slaves' eyes held a flicker of hope. The promise and Otto's promotion were undeniable proof. Even the soldiers were infected by the mood. Some veterans joked, "My lord, when do we get wives?" I laughed. "Wait until we secure Conford and build our town. I'll bring you each a beautiful girl from France City." The soldiers cheered, their fatigue momentarily forgotten. Amidst this mix of hope and tension, a sturdy, well-planned camp rose rapidly. As the last fence was set, the system chimed. Task: establish a camp and build solid defenses. Completed. Reward: intelligence. A goblin scout team from the Black Tooth Cave, 3 kilometers northeast, has observed your layout. They plan to raid your camp at dawn, when you are most exhausted, to seize slaves and supplies. Goblins, also known as cave dwellers in the northern frontier, are distinct from the beast-like kobolds. They are intelligent, half the height of humans, and adapted to dark, cramped underground spaces. They are cunning, cruel, and organized, favoring traps and ambushes. They are far more dangerous than mere kobolds. Their tactical planning confirmed their nature. I gasped, my last shred of optimism vanished. Brendan was right. I stared sharply at the undulating hills to the northeast. The enemy was ready. So were we. Night fell, leaving only the crackle of campfires and the rhythmic steps of sentries. Inside the command tent, I issued a shocking order. Pass the word. Everyone, including auxiliaries, will sleep in full armor tonight. Keep weapons within reach. Stay at maximum alert. The officers were stunned. Even the steady Brendan protested. My lord, it was just a vague feeling. Is this not an overreaction? The men will be exhausted tomorrow if they sleep in heavy armor. Others nodded in agreement. I looked at them, my voice firm. Brendan, your intuition has never failed. In the northern frontier, survival depends on assuming the worst. We are too weak to afford a single mistake. The price is our lives. Execute the order. My tone left no room for debate. The officers saluted and left, though they remained skeptical. The news caused an uproar among the troops. Sleeping in full armor was torture. The militia, in light leather, could manage, but it was a struggle. Richter's 30 veterans suffered most in their heavy, cold chainmail. The iron shells made lying down nearly impossible. Despite the grumbling, their training and obedience prevailed. They donned their gear, clutched their weapons, and lay down, trying to sleep. A tense, oppressive atmosphere blanketed the camp. I set the example, donning my own cold chainmail, my helmet at my side. I sat against the tent's central pillar, sword in hand, closing my eyes. I didn't need to sleep. I was waiting for the raid. A mile away, behind a gentle slope, the night was thick as ink. If one could pierce the darkness, they would see hundreds of small, hunched figures. They were the goblins of the Black Tooth Cave. These humanoids wore crude animal skins or scavenged, ill-fitting human rags. The stronger leaders wore makeshift armor of scavenged metal plates. Their weapons, rusted short swords, notched cleavers, and bone daggers, glinted in the starlight. They were silent as locusts, their presence betrayed only by ragged breathing and the faint clatter of weapons. A scout in tattered leather slunk back to the leader, who wore a scavenged, oversized human cavalry helmet. A goblin scout whispered to its leader, "Boss, Those humans are well fortified with deep trenches, earth walls, and wooden palisades. They're alert. A direct assault will cost us dearly. The leader, Skull Crusher, narrowed his eyes, his fingers tapping his bloodied hand axe. A tough nut. Skull Crusher rasped. Poison Fong, take 100 scouts. Probe them, but don't commit. If they fight back hard, retreat immediately. The rest of us will provide support. He knew the human caravan was wealthy, but heavily guarded. His strategy was to harass them like a wolf pack, denying them sleep and wearing them down. We'll find a weakness eventually, Poison Fong growled, his eyes gleaming with bloodlust. Understood, boss. Poison Fong quickly selected 100 fierce, agile goblins, barking orders to loot, kill the weak, and flee if things went south. The 50 goblins vanished into the shadows, creeping toward the campfire-lit camp. I sensed the unnatural disturbance in the darkness almost immediately. I snapped my eyes open. My soldiers, already tense and sleeping in their armor, heard it too. Bang! A gunshot rang out, followed by a shout. Enemy attack. Southwest. I sprang up like a leopard, roaring. Enemy attack. Positions. Prepare for battle. My soldiers, exhausted by the long wait, felt a sense of relief. They jumped up, grabbed their weapons, and rushed to the trenches and palisades under the command of Brendan, Richter, and Roland. As they took their places, twisted, snarling figures surged out of the darkness toward the trench. A volley of spears and stones flew at us. Shields. My infantry roared, raising their defenses. The projectiles clattered against the shields, causing minor injuries but little real damage. Musketeer squad. Fire at the trench. Brendan commanded. My musketeers leveled their weapons over the palisades at the goblins filling the trench. Fire. A thunderous volley erupted, lead balls scything through the goblins. The goblins were packed so tightly that each bullet struck multiple targets. Limbs flew, and screams filled the air, accompanied by the stench of gunpowder and blood. The goblins were stunned by the sheer lethality. They hesitated, clearly unfamiliar with such weaponry. But their ferocity returned, and they shrieked, charging forward again. Those who leaped the trench were met by a forest of spears thrust through the palisade gaps. They were skewered mid-air, writhing in agony. Others trying to climb the palisades were shoved back by my swordsmen, falling onto the sharpened stakes in the trench. Their first probe was a bloody failure. It was their first and last attempt. As my men began to slaughter the invaders, I decided to end it. I blew the metal whistle Charlotte had given me. The piercing sound cut through the chaos. Every soldier looked toward me. I raised my bloodied sword and shouted, "Brothers, follow me." I wasn't just giving an order. I was leading them into the fray. I kicked open the palisade and leaped into the retreating goblins. I skewered a fleeing goblin through the back. I kicked the corpse aside, then swept my sword, severing the arm of another. I fought like a tiger, my blade flashing as I carved through the enemy. My men's morale soared. Charge. Protect the Lord. Kill the green-skinned scum. For the Lord. A thunderous roar erupted as my soldiers poured over the defenses. They formed up around me, pushing the attack further. The demoralized goblins were cut down in moments. Realizing they were outmatched, their will to fight shattered. They turned and fled into the southwestern darkness. Panic spread, and the survivors scrambled to escape. Pursue them, Brendan and Richter shouted. Halt, I commanded with absolute authority. Follow me. I ignored the fleeing bait and led my energized troops toward the northeast. I knew their main force was hiding near the Black Tooth cave in that direction. The southwestern retreat was merely a distraction. Skull Crusher, watching from the northeastern slope, was paralyzed with shock. He was terrified. He realized how fast we had mobilized. We had clearly expected the raid. The sight of me leading the charge had shattered his resolve. He no longer dared to commit his main force. He hoped we would chase the decoys so he could escape. Yes, chase the trash, he prayed. I made sure they attacked from the southwest, so you'd think the nest was there. But then, his eyes widened in horror. I wasn't chasing the decoys. I was charging directly toward his position. How? How does he know? He gasped, overwhelmed by dread. I led my steel torrent through the darkness, charging directly toward the enemy's hidden position with unstoppable momentum. Skull Crusher froze, terror gripping its spine. It couldn't fathom how I had pinpointed its main force so accurately. With me less than 100 meters away, the goblin leader stared at my cold, murderous intent and the savage expressions of my soldiers. Panic rippled through the goblin ranks. Their legs trembled in fear. Spearmen, front line, form up. Skullcrusher roared, desperate to hold its ground. It hoped to use the slope to blunt our charge and escape in the chaos. Dozens of goblins scrambled to the front. Their spears were mere 1.5-meter wooden sticks, though formidable for creatures only 80 centimeters tall. They leveled their points, creating a sparse, desperate wall of wood. Their hope was shattered in an instant. I didn't slow down, I accelerated. As I hit their line, I sidestepped and swung my longsword, snapping their wooden spears like twigs. I snatched a spear shaft with my left hand and yanked it back with brute force. The goblin was ripped off its feet and hurled into its own ranks, bowling them over. I charged through the gap, a tiger among sheep. My blade flashed, reaping limbs and life. My speed and strength turned the skirmish into a massacre. Follow me. Crush them. My soldiers surged forward, hacking through the flimsy wooden spears with ease. Our spearmen exploited their reach, skewering goblins from a safe distance. Our swordsmen used their iron-reinforced shields to shove the goblins aside before finishing them with ruthless cuts. The goblin line collapsed instantly, turning the slope into a slaughterhouse. Desperate wails echoed across the hill. My men moved in efficient three-man squads, purging the remaining green-skinned threats. Skullcrusher watched the hellish scene, its courage shattered. It parried a strike and retreated, desperate to vanish into the chaos. But Richter and Brendan had already locked eyes on its distinctive armor and oversized helmet. "Kill it," Brendan roared, cutting down a defender and closing in. Richter flanked from the other side, his blade snaking out to silence a guard. As Skullcrusher turned to flee, a cold flash of steel forced it to raise its hand axe in defense. The impact numbed its arm and knocked its helmet askew. Before it could recover, the veteran Brendan lunged, driving his sword through its abdomen. Skullcrusher shrieked, dropping its axe as agony consumed it. It stared at the blade in disbelief, eyes filled with despair. Brendan withdrew his sword, and the leader collapsed, its life bleeding into the dirt. Its final sight was its army routed and me, their lord, cutting down its last loyalist. Only a few lucky goblins escaped into the dark, never daring to look back. Silence returned to the slope, marked only by the stench of blood and piles of corpses. The battle over, my men began to clean the field. The goblins' crude gear was worthless, and there was no bounty for their remains. Standing on the ridge, I recalled the system's intel regarding the Blacktooth Cave. A long-standing tribe might have hidden loot. Brendan, Richter, organized search parties. Three-man squads, torches, head northeast. Find the cave. Kill any resistance. Understood. Soon, torches flickered in the forest like fireflies. They quickly found a hidden fissure in the rock wall, reeking of rot and filth. Jagged, tooth-like rocks surrounded the entrance, the source of the Blacktooth name. I arrived with my elite guard. With Brendan and Roland flanking me, I ducked into the dark tunnel. The cave was spacious, expanded over years, but the air was nauseating. It smelled of excrement, rot, and the musk of humanoid beasts. The walls were scratched and stained. The floor was littered with gnawed bones. We encountered goblins hiding inside tunnels. They were mostly the infirm, mothers with young, and grotesque human-goblin hybrids. My men executed them without hesitation. In the northern frontier, goblins were a known plague. They raided villages and, most infamously, kidnapped human women. Goblins were a degenerate branch of humanity, mutated by ancient magic, and could interbreed with us. To be taken by goblins was a fate worse than death, as women were kept as breeding stock. I prayed we wouldn't find any victims, the thought alone chilling my blood. We pushed through to a large central chamber. My torchlight revealed a sight that made my heart sink. My worst fears were realized. In the corner, 5 emaciated, near-naked women were chained to the stone wall. They huddled together, screaming in terror at the light, their eyes deadened by long-term abuse. But as they realized we were human, their fear turned to stunned disbelief. A glimmer of hope returned to their eyes. "Don't be afraid. We are human, I said softly, as my men moved to break their chains. The chains fell away. A woman, appearing older and still somewhat lucid, trembled and asked in a raspy voice, "My lord, has the kingdom reclaimed the northern frontier? Are you the royal army?" I stepped forward, projecting a firm, reliable tone. "I am Karl von Schmidt, the newly appointed pioneer lord of Carnford for the Plantagenet kingdom. The goblins have been wiped out. You are free." "Free. We're free." Wah! Upon hearing "free," the 5 women were stunned, followed by an explosion of grief, resentment, and the ecstatic relief of survival. They embraced and wept, their heartbreaking cries echoing through the cave, a testament to suffering that would move even the hardest soldier. After a long while, their sobbing finally subsided. The woman who spoke first wiped her eyes, her face filled with despair. "Thank you, my lord, but we have nowhere to go. The Solonians slaughtered our families. Even if we leave, the northern frontier is a death trap." She looked up, pleading, "My lord, please, let us follow you. We can do anything. Laundry, cooking, sewing. Just give us a way to live." I hesitated. Taking them on would undoubtedly add burden and variables. Yet, abandoning these women in the wilderness would be no different from the goblins. I sighed and nodded. "Very well. Join my group. I will provide food, protection, and work for you." The women burst into tears again, this time tears of gratitude. Richter ran out from the depths, whispering excitedly, "My lord, there's a treasure cave. We found riches." I perked up and ordered, "Brendan, Roland, settle them in. Find them warm clothes and food." I followed Richter through narrow passages to a cave illuminated by torches. My breath hitched at the sight, several old but sturdy wooden crates in the corner. One was pried open, filled with dazzling gold coins, while 2 others were stacked with silver coins. The gold and silver shimmered under the torchlight. I estimated at least 50 gold coins and over 100 silver, excluding miscellaneous items at the bottom. This was a massive windfall, covering half my initial investment and securing our future development. This was the Blacktooth tribe's accumulated loot. "Excellent." I patted Richter's shoulder. "Count it all and take it. Not a single copper left behind." This treasure provided a solid foundation for rebuilding Carnford. The night battle yielded both human resources and capital, far exceeding expectations. The troops regrouped at the hillside. I counted heads. Aside from a few light injuries from goblin projectiles, we had no casualties. It was a resounding victory. 0 deaths, the total annihilation of the goblin force, and a rich haul. We returned to camp with the 5 rescued women and the heavy treasure chests, weary but triumphant. On the way, I worried. With all soldiers deployed, would the slaves left behind riot? Approaching the camp, we were stunned. The camp was brightly lit by torches. The slaves were not rioting. They had formed loose squads. They held scavenged goblin spears, clubs, and knives, guarding the gaps in the fence with nervous vigilance. Their movements were clumsy, but their intent to protect the camp was clear. Seeing my return, they relaxed, lowered their weapons, and looked at me with awe and curiosity. I was shocked. I never expected them to organize and defend the camp on their own. Otto and 8 other slave leaders I recognized approached me. Otto stammered, "My lord, we heard the fighting and feared other monsters might sneak in. We took the greenskins' weapons to guard the camp. We meant no harm. We just wanted to help." They bowed their heads, fearing punishment for their initiative. My reaction surprised them. I stepped forward, beaming with appreciation. I walked to Otto, ignoring the social divide, and gripped his calloused, dirty hand firmly. Otto froze, stunned, as did the surrounding slaves and soldiers. "Otto, you did well." I patted his shoulder. I went to each of them, asking their names, shaking their hands, and offering sincere praise. These leaders had only ever known abuse and neglect. Now, their lord was treating them like decorated soldiers. This respect was more impactful than any gold. Loyalty and disbelief flooded them. Some trembled, some teared up, others grinned, unable to speak. I raised my voice for all to hear. "You saw it. Otto, Morgan, Finn, all of you who took up arms tonight. You did exceptionally well." I scanned the slaves. I said loyalty would be rewarded. Tonight, you proved your worth. I have noted your service. I promise, once we reach Carnford, everyone who stood guard tonight will receive extra food. And for these 9 leaders, I will reward you personally, perhaps with better clothes, or even the status of a freeman. The crowd erupted in cheers. Freeman status. It was a dream they never dared to have. Their eyes shifted as they looked at me. I was no longer just a distant, terrifying lord, but a leader guiding them toward hope. The cohesion of the slave group had become stronger than ever. The next 2 days of travel were smooth. Perhaps news of our annihilation of the goblin tribe had deterred other predators. We encountered no further trouble. When the dilapidated silhouette of the fortress appeared on the horizon, the group slowed their pace. The air was thick with anticipation, awe, and the weight of history. The ruins of Carnford Fortress sat atop a hill, occupying a prime strategic position. 3 sides were steep, almost vertical, with only a gentle western slope acting as a natural corridor to the summit. A clear stream flowed down the hill, confirming a reliable water source. The defensive system was clear, 2 rings of walls, with the outer wall lower and the inner wall higher and thicker. Remnants of watchtowers and arrow towers remained on the walls, along with firing slits. At the core stood the main keep, damaged but structurally sound, the former residence of the Lord and his commanders. "Cranford, it's Cranford," Oldmore shouted, his voice thick with emotion. He stared at the ruins, tears streaming down his face. "I'm back. I've finally returned." Hans, Wally, Firth, and the other craftsmen gazed at the wreckage with a mix of longing and grief, as if reuniting with a broken old friend. I watched them in silence, understanding the weight of their sorrow. This place had once held their life's work and ambitions before becoming the site of their downfall. I signaled the team to advance up the western slope, where the scars of the brutal siege remained visible. Rolling logs, rotting timber, and bleached skulls lay scattered among the weeds. Fragments of armor and weapons revealed the history of the slaughter. Plantagenet gear mixed with the crude bone blades of the Solonians. We soon reached the first wall. Outside lay a dried-up moat, through which a small stream still trickled. The main gate had collapsed, and the drawbridge hung precariously over the moat. My soldiers quickly reinforced the bridge with timber and rope to ensure our supplies could cross safely. Inside the outer wall lay a wide area once used for training and housing refugees. Old Moore and his craftsmen immediately began inspecting the ruins, lost in their professional grief. I left them to it and led the rest toward the inner wall, where the defenses had been even more fiercely contested. The inner gate was blocked by a rusted, fallen portcullis. Piles of Solonian skeletons outside the gate testified to the heavy toll the defenders had exacted. "It's impassable," Richter reported. "My lord, over here," Roland called out. "A section of the wall has collapsed. We found a massive breach in the inner wall. The gap was choked with the remains of Plantagenet and Solonian soldiers, a silent testament to the desperate fighting that had occurred here. My men cleared a path, and we marched through the breach into the heart of Cranford. The core area featured a 3-story lord's keep surrounded by ruined structures. Barracks, smithies, stables, and a training ground lay buried under moss and dust. The keep had taken the brunt of the assault, its 3rd floor almost entirely destroyed. Yet, amidst the silence, a flicker of life remained. Crude shacks had been erected against the sturdier walls of the inner barracks. Gaunt, ragged figures peeked out at the sound of our arrival. About 20 survivors, men, women, and children, stared at us with hollow, terrified eyes. They were refugees who had survived the Northern Frontier War, hiding in these ruins to scrape by. As my armed soldiers appeared, the women screamed and pulled their children into the shadows, while the men trembled, desperate to protect their families. They braced for the end, fearing the Solonians had returned or new raiders had arrived. But upon seeing the Plantagenet kingdom's banners and our disciplined appearance, their terror shifted into stunned bewilderment. I signaled my men to lower their weapons and stepped forward, keeping my voice gentle. "Do not fear. I am Karl von Schmidt, the newly appointed pioneer lord of Carnford. We are here to restore order and rebuild." A skeletal, elderly man crawled forward, his voice a raspy whisper. "My lord, the kingdom has not forgotten us. The army has returned." "Yes, We have, I confirmed, gesturing to my troops. We are here to stay, to rebuild this fortress and protect you all. As my identity sank in, their dead-eyed despair melted into overwhelming ecstasy and gratitude. The kingdom hasn't abandoned us, they wept, collapsing to their knees to bow before us. They had lived in constant fear and starvation, long since stripped of all hope. My arrival felt like a miracle to them, and seeing these hollowed-out survivors left me with a heavy, solemn sense of duty. Brendan, organize the men, start a fire and get everyone, including the refugees, a hot meal immediately. My soldiers moved instantly to obey. Soon, campfires flickered in the heart of Conford, the rising smoke signaling the end of the long, desolate silence. I took a deep breath and approached the ruined Lord's Keep. Pushing open the rotting, scarred wooden doors, I was hit by a sickening stench of dust, mold, and decay. I covered my nose and mouth with a scarf before stepping inside. The interior was a horrific time capsule of the day the fortress fell. The entrance hall was in total disarray. A skeleton in Plantagenet chainmail lay by the door, a rusted Solonian scimitar in its ribs, its own sword buried in the eye socket of a Solonian corpse. The main hall was a graveyard of shattered shields, broken spears, and tattered banners. More skeletons lay in piles, evidence of the brutal close-quarters fighting that had occurred here. The walls were scarred by blades and arrows, stained with dark, dried blood. The furniture had been reduced to piles of rotted wood. A massive stone fireplace was choked with ash and charred bones. I reached the second floor, but the main wooden staircase had been smashed, blocking the way. Piles of remains lay at the base, victims who had died fighting for control of the stairs. I carefully ascended a narrow, cracked stone spiral staircase instead. The second floor, once living quarters, was dim and filled with the debris of death. In a study, a skeleton in scholar's robes lay slumped over a desk, its skull crushed. In a bedroom, a female skeleton lay curled in a corner, clutching a smaller, child-sized skeleton. The stairs to the third floor were nearly blocked by rubble, but I climbed up to witness the final devastation. The top floor had clearly been the target of heavy bombardment, Solonian artillery, or perhaps dark magic. The level was largely collapsed, with massive stones and beams having punched through to the floor below. The remaining walls were scarred by scorch marks and massive impact craters. Corpses lay scattered, many crushed beneath boulders in a gruesome display. This had clearly been the defenders' final command post, subjected to the most ruthless assault. I stepped out of the grim castle into the sunlight, inhaling the cold, revitalizing air. The ruins were heavy, but my priority was securing survival for the living. Old Moore approached, his expression a mix of excitement and anxiety after surveying the walls. "My lord, shall we begin rebuilding the main keep immediately?" To him, the keep was the essential symbol of power and security for any lord. I shook my head, eyeing the wreckage. "No more. The keep is too damaged. Its symbolic value doesn't outweigh our need for defense. A sturdy wall is our only hope for survival here." I gestured to the refugees huddled in the inner city. Before the walls, we must house our soldiers, slaves, and new arrivals. We cannot live in tents forever. Moore looked at me with surprise, then deep admiration. My perspective differed from any noble he had known. I prioritized the needs of the people, soldiers and slaves alike, over empty displays of status. "You are right, my lord." I was narrow-minded. "Let us begin with housing." I gathered Moore, Hans, Wally, and Firth to discuss designs. While soldiers could rebuild barracks, housing 300 slaves and 20 refugees was the immediate challenge. We needed something fast, warm, and built from accessible materials. I proposed semi-subterranean houses, dug into the earth with timber frames and thatched roofs. They would be warm, quick to build, and perfect for the northern frontier's cold. The craftsmen were stunned by my engineering knowledge. Moore nodded eagerly. "A brilliant solution, my lord." He sketched the plans, detailing depth, supports, and ventilation. We put the slaves to work. They no longer required harsh supervision. Captains Otto, Morgan, and Finn had organized them effectively, and they worked with newfound vigor. They knew that serving me meant food, rewards, and the distant hope of freedom. Meanwhile, I tasked the soldiers with a solemn duty, clearing the remains from Conford. They worked in silence, hauling cartloads of bones down the slope. I gave strict orders. Dispose of the Solonians, but treat our Plantagenet soldiers with honor. They died protecting this land and our people. They are our brothers in arms. They shall not be abandoned. The soldiers complied meticulously. Solonian remains were cast into a deep pit. Our fallen were carefully gathered, limbs reassembled where possible, and wrapped in cloth. They were laid in a mass grave with the dignity of a silent army at rest. I ordered a heavy stone monument placed before the grave. The scribe carved a simple inscription: "Here lie the defenders of Confort." They fought in despair, giving their last drop of blood for the kingdom and its people. Their spirits endure. Erected by their successor, Karl von Schmidt, and the builders of this new era. The soldiers, refugees, and slaves watched the ceremony in silence. A sense of unity and belonging began to take root among us. With the dead honored, life began to sprout from the ruins of Confort. 3 days later, the inner city was transformed. The first dozen semi-subterranean houses stood behind the outer wall. Though crude, their timber frames and thick earthen thatch roofs provided vital protection against the northern winds. Centralized fire pits between the houses provided warmth, light, and a place to cook. Smoke rose into the air, carrying the scent of food and the sound of voices, breathing life into the dead city. The barracks and training grounds were restored, giving soldiers proper quarters and a place to drill. Under my orders, training resumed. The sounds of marching and clashing weapons became the new rhythm of Confort. Discipline was our foundation. Other essential areas were also restored. The granary was reinforced and stocked with rye, wheat, and soybeans from France City. The stables were repaired, protecting our horses, which were as vital as any soldier. The blacksmith's forge was relit, and the sound of hammering signaled our recovery. We also solved our water crisis. I led a team upstream to find the source, discovering a spring intentionally blocked by Solonian debris. It was a clear act of sabotage from the siege. We cleared the obstruction, and fresh, cold water surged forth. The moat began to fill, providing both water and a defensive barrier. We lacked the resources to fully repair the outer walls. We reinforced the major breaches with earth-filled grass bags to prevent further collapse. Major repairs would have to wait, but we did manage to fix the outer drawbridge. We replaced the broken chains with oil-soaked ropes of bark and vine. They were sufficient for daily use. The inner portcullis, however, was beyond repair. More reported that the iron bolts had rusted into the stone channels. It was permanently jammed. I abandoned the idea of using the old gate and focused on the wall breach. We cleared the rubble and widened the breach into a functional entrance. The craftsman installed a sturdy double-door frame made of deep-set logs, secured by a heavy wooden bar. This became the new, primary gateway into the inner city of Confort. Despite improving conditions in the inner city, I continue to live in the barracks with my soldiers. My quarters are a partitioned corner containing only a cot, a chest for my gear and maps, and a small desk for night work. This lack of aristocratic pretense has earned me the genuine devotion of my people. With Confort's basic functions restored, I decided to fulfill my initial promises to boost morale and unify the populace. I announced a celebration to mark the completion of our first homes and our improved living conditions. I wanted to prove that their hard work would be rewarded and that our future is bright. Despite the night chill, the outer city was vibrant. Huge bonfires roared, and large pots of meat broth and thick porridge were prepared for everyone. Soldiers, former slaves, refugees, and the 5 rescued women sat around the fires, filled with anticipation. The air was thick with the scent of food, the crackle of wood, and the buzz of conversation. Soldiers placed a large, flat stone in front of the main bonfire. I stepped forward. Dressed in my practical hunting gear and a cloak, I approached the gathering. The crowd erupted in cheers and whistles. They had learned that I disliked stiff etiquette, and this boisterous display was their way of showing respect. I climbed onto the stone and gestured for silence. The crowd fell quiet, eyes fixed on me. "Everyone," I shouted, "this is our first celebration in Confort, but I promise you, it will not be the last." My opening was met with enthusiastic applause. We cleared the ruins and built homes with our own hands. Today, I fulfill my promise to reward those who contributed to our survival. Brendan handed me a list. I read the names aloud. Otto, Finn, Morgan, Luke, Jim, Thomas, Barry, Avon, Alvin. The slave leaders stepped forward, struggling to contain their excitement. In the past, being called out by a lord meant doom. Now, they stood tall with pride. I stepped down to face them. For your hard work, management, and loyalty during the Goblin attack, I, Karl von Schmidt, Lord of Conford, make this declaration. From this moment on, you are no longer slaves. You are free. Though they expected it, the confirmation left them trembling with emotion. I drew my sword, the blade glinting in the firelight, and approached Otto. Otto knelt, and the others followed suit. I tapped his shoulders with my blade. By sword and oath, you are shed of your chains and are now freemen. The ceremony was simple but profound, as I performed the rite for each of them, shattering their invisible shackles. After sheathing my sword, I told them, I will have you registered and issued official documents as freemen. The remaining slaves watched their peers weep with joy, their eyes burning with envy and longing. Seeing a tangible path to freedom, they vowed to work harder to secure the next quota. I turned to the slaves and announced, this is the reward for loyalty. Every month, I will grant 10 slaves who contribute most to Conford their freedom. Long live Lord Karl. The slaves cheered, their voices filled with newfound hope. I turned to my soldiers with a smirk. As for you, you'll have to wait 10 more days for your pay. The soldiers responded with good-natured jeers. A bold veteran shouted, we don't want money. We want wives. The crowd erupted in agreement. Yes, we want wives. The atmosphere turned lively as they clamored for my promise. I laughed and replied, I remember. Next month, I will write to Count Rockefort in France City to recruit settlers, especially women. Whether you get a wife will depend on your own charm. The soldiers roared in celebration, and the night was filled with song and laughter as the feast reached its peak. Watching the scene, I felt a deep sense of accomplishment. A good start had been made, despite the long road ahead. I had proven that loyalty, sweat, and courage would be rewarded here. As Conford's reconstruction began, the administrative workload grew immense. I officially appointed Old Moore as the scribe of Conford. This role meant he was responsible for nearly all administrative affairs. As a former assistant engineer at the kingdom's Military Engineering Bureau, he was the only one here with the necessary education and management skills. He was buried under tasks, registering new freemen, tracking grain, planning logistics, and recording events. Conversely, I became a hands-off leader, and Old Moore began to notice my quirks. While I possessed a military genius, I lacked interest and aptitude for mundane administration. I provided visionary ideas, but lacked the patience for the details. Concepts like semi-subterranean housing and reward systems were mine, but the execution was left to Old Moore and Brendan. I was a natural military commander, not an all-around administrator. My energy was focused entirely on training, tactics, and defense. Internal management was delegated to Old Moore and the increasingly capable Brendan. That morning, good news arrived. Brendan and Roland had successfully refined the breath of the North Wind. Roland used the energy to break through, becoming a Tier 2 knight with significantly increased combat power. However, elderly Brendan failed to break through. Perhaps due to his age, old injuries, or his mindset, the energy only solidified his strength at Tier 1 peak. It seemed his path as a knight had reached its limit. I was considering how to comfort my diligent old knight, Brendan, when he approached me himself. Brendan looked calm, even relieved. My path as a knight has reached its end, my lord. I no longer need to exhaust myself on battle chi or martial arts. Please allow me to assist Mr. Moore with administration or help train our new recruits. Seeing his sincerity, I was moved and immediately granted his request. I appointed Brendan as the military commander of Conford, tasking him with training, discipline, and defensive planning. I also decided to refine our military structure, as Richter was currently overstretched managing 30 veterans alone. After consulting with Brendan and Richter, we decided to promote 2 or 3 outstanding veterans to sergeant to share the management burden. Thus, Old Moore took charge of internal affairs, and Brendan handled military training and defense, becoming my true right and left hands. This simple yet effective system finally freed me from trivialities, allowing me to focus on the territory's overall strategy. My office was a corner of the castle's main hall, which had been cleared of debris. Though still dilapidated, it served well enough with a desk, shelves, and chairs. Old Moore entered, carrying a stack of parchment and boards, looking exhausted but fulfilled. "My lord," he said, placing the documents on my desk. "These require your review and seal. Population registration is mostly complete. Here is the list of freemen and their draft identification papers for your signature and seal." I scanned the list, signed the papers, and solemnly stamped each one with the Schmidt family copper seal. "Secondly," Moore said seriously, "our grain consumption is unsustainable. We must restore local agriculture. The land at the foot of the mountain is fertile but neglected. We need manpower, seeds, and tools." I nodded. "This is our top priority. Draft a reclamation plan. Use whatever we have in the warehouse, and I will find a way to purchase the rest in France City. Prioritize freemen and well-behaved slaves for this work." "Third," Moore sighed, "we have no income. All expenses, pay, rations, and tool maintenance, are draining the funds you brought from the family and our recent spoils. We must find a revenue source." I frowned. Commercial activity in the northern frontier was stagnant, and taxes were non-existent. "I understand. I will think on this." Moore's tone lightened as he handed me a small slip. "Finally, a bit of good news. The freeman Otto wishes to marry the slave Marissa. They request permission to build a small, independent home." I smiled at the news. This was exactly what I wanted: stability, families, and, most importantly, a taxable base. I promptly wrote "approved" on the slip and signed it. "Tell them they may build it during their off hours. They can requisition materials from the warehouse." "Yes, my lord." Moore bowed and left. Alone, I watched the soldiers training and the people working. Administration was tedious, but I was fortunate to have reliable help. Now, the most urgent problem remained: how to make Conford self-sufficient. As I worried over our finances, a familiar, timely notification sounded in my mind. Daily task updated. Task: personally officiate the wedding of Otto and Marissa. Incomplete. My mood lifted instantly. Whatever the intelligence was, this task was pleasant and easily completed. I decided to set aside the economic worries for the moment. "Brendan," I called, "tell Otto and Marissa and everyone else that I will personally officiate their wedding in the outer city square this afternoon." The news spread, and Conford was soon filled with a festive atmosphere. A wedding officiated by the Lord himself for former slaves was unheard of. That afternoon, the sun was bright. The outer city square had been cleaned, with a small bonfire lit to symbolize joy. Soldiers, freemen, slaves, and refugees gathered in a circle, watching with curiosity and kind smiles. Otto wore clean, albeit old, coarse clothes. His hair was combed, and he looked nervous and flushed. Marissa wore a borrowed dark dress and a simple crown of wildflowers, blushing with happiness. I stood before them, dressed in my usual attire, my expression solemn yet warm. I looked around and spoke clearly. "We gather today not for war or labor, but to witness a beautiful event, the union of love and the birth of a family. Otto has earned his freedom and love through diligence. Marissa has found her redemption and home through kindness. Their union proves that hope never fades, even in the hardest times. Today, I, Karl von Schmidt, Lord of Conford, officiate your wedding. You are now legally recognized and protected. May you support each other and build our new home together." I looked at Otto. "Do you take Marissa as your wife, to love and respect her through wealth or poverty, health or sickness, until the end of your days?" Otto's voice trembled as he shouted, "I do, my lord. I do." I turned to Marissa. "Do you take Otto as your husband, to support him through smooth or rough paths, happiness or hardship, until the end of your days?" Marissa looked up, tears in her eyes, and nodded firmly. "I do, my lord." "Good." I smiled. "In the name of the Lord, I declare you husband and wife. May your union bring luck and vitality to Conford." I stepped forward and joined their hands. "Kiss her. Kiss her." The soldiers cheered, heating up the atmosphere. Otto clumsily kissed Marissa's cheek, drawing laughter and cheers from the crowd. Task: personally officiate the wedding of Otto and Marissa. Completed. Reward: intelligence. A forgotten, high-quality flint mine is hidden behind vines 10 meters down the north cliff. It contains significant flint and a small, extractable amount of iron ore. Flint is essential for fire starting, arrows, and tools, while the iron can be smelted into basic items like nails, hoes, axes, and blades. This mine was a game-changer, solving our reliance on external supplies for raw materials. With this, Conford's self-sufficiency would take a qualitative leap. We could even produce surplus goods to sell in France City, finally opening a source of income. I immediately took action. Mining a cliff is dangerous, so I summoned Hans the mason and Wally the carpenter. I didn't reveal the source of my knowledge, instead saying, "Hans, Wally, while clearing the ruins, I found a logbook mentioning a potential flint vein in the North Cliff." I explained that successful mining would allow us to craft our own arrowheads, flints, and tools, while selling the surplus in France City to resolve our financial crisis. Hans and Wally were visibly excited. As craftsmen, they understood the value of a stable source of high-quality materials. "I must verify this myself, my lord," Hans said cautiously. I led him, Wally, and several assistants to the northern cliff, a steep, bottomless drop. To ensure safety, we secured Hans with ropes held by soldiers while he leaned over the edge to inspect the cliff face. After a long while, we pulled him back up. Hans was ecstatic. "You were right. Beneath the vines and moss, about 10 meters down, there is a clear, high-quality flint vein. We can definitely mine this." With the vein confirmed, we moved to planning the extraction. Hans and Wally provided their professional input. Hans pointed to the cliff. "Direct work is too dangerous. We need a sturdy wooden platform at the edge, and Wally must build a pulley system to lower men and materials." Wally added, "Once lowered, workers will drive wooden stakes into the cliff to build a hanging platform, allowing for safe, repeatable, and downward expanding mining." Hans suggested fire setting. "Flint is too hard for direct chiseling. We'll heat the rock with torches, then douse it with cold stream water. The thermal shock will crack the stone, making it easy to break with hammers and chisels." He estimated 5 days for the first batch and 2 to 3 weeks for full production capacity. I emphasized that safety was paramount. Speed is secondary. If safety measures aren't perfect, we stop. "Hans, Wally, you have full authority. Take whatever resources you need from Mr. Moore." "Understood, my lord. We will be extremely cautious," they replied, moved by my concern for their lives. We began immediately. Wally returned to the workshop to design the pulleys, while Hans organized the labor. I assigned 3 slave cohorts, nearly 100 men under Otto, Morgan, and Luke, to handle logging and transport. I forbade cutting trees on the mountain, keeping them as a strategic reserve for potential sieges. All timber had to be hauled from distant forests. Despite the extra work, the slaves were motivated. They saw this as a chance to contribute and earn favor. Half of Conford was mobilized for the mining effort. Under Hans's direction, slaves hauled logs to the cliff, securing them with wooden wedges and precious iron nails to build the base platform. Their morale was high, and their progress was swift. By evening, a sturdy, expansive wooden platform extended over the cliff. Hans tested it by jumping on it, and having several men stand there, it held firm. "That's enough for today," Hans ordered as the sun set. "We'll resume tomorrow once the pulley system is ready." The men packed up their tools, prioritizing safety. Wally reported, "The pulley design is done. I'll work through the night to have the first set ready by morning." The next morning, Mr. Moore arrived at my office early, clutching a thick stack of papers. "My lord, this is my agricultural reclamation plan," he said, his eyes bloodshot, but his spirit high. I reviewed the plan, once again impressed by his efficiency. It was exhaustive. He identified fertile, irrigable land at the mountain's base and recommended planting rye, cold-resistant beans, and vegetables based on soil quality. He detailed labor requirements, animal power, seed quantities, and a comparison of current tool inventory versus needs. He even included sketches for an irrigation system. "My lord, it is time for spring plowing," Moore urged. "The northern frontier's frost-free window is short. Our survival depends on this harvest. We cannot delay." His words made me realize the urgency. Food was the foundation of our survival, far more critical than immediate mining revenue. I decided instantly, Mr. Moore, you are right. Spring plowing is the priority. You have all remaining slave cohorts, the 30 refugees, all female slaves, 5 horses, and all tools. If needed, you can take Roland's auxiliary soldiers. Moore bowed deeply, moved by my trust. Thank you, my lord. I will not fail you. I'll organize the men immediately. He left in a hurry, and soon the sound of mobilization echoed from the mountain base. With that settled, I headed to the northern cliff, where the scene had changed. Wally had installed 2 sturdy pulley systems at the edge of the platform. Thick ropes ran through the pulleys, one end anchored to a massive log, the other dangling into the abyss. Hans was overseeing the first hanging operation. 2 carefully selected slaves, secured by safety ropes, were being slowly lowered down the cliff face. The onlookers held their breath as the wind buffeted the men, causing them to sway. They reached the vine-covered flint vein safely. Steady, Hans shouted from the platform. Find the cracks. Drive the hardwood wedges in firmly. The slaves extracted their hammers and wedges, aiming for the rock fissures. The dull thud of hammers echoed from below. As they worked, we adjusted the ropes to allow them to cover more area, a slow and meticulous process. After a long time, they signaled that the wedges were set. We pulled one slave up to rest while the other remained on standby. Next, we lowered pre-cut wooden planks. The slave below received the planks, securing them onto the wedges with iron nails and hemp rope. We adjusted the plank positions based on his signals. From morning until afternoon, the work continued in an orderly, intense fashion. I stood silently behind the platform, observing Hans's command. My presence served as a silent oversight. Though sweat soaked the workers' clothes and their arms ached, no one complained. They understood the project's importance to our territory. By sunset, as the cliffs glowed orange, the 10-square-meter suspended platform was finally complete. Hans personally inspected every wedge, plank, and anchor point, even ordering a jump test to ensure stability. Excellent. It's solid, Hans reported with a satisfied smile. My lord, the platform is ready. Tomorrow, we begin fire mining the first flint samples. Looking at the engineering marvel clinging to the cliff and the exhausted yet proud workers, I felt a surge of hope. At dawn, the system's chime signaled. Daily task updated. Task: travel to France City and purchase 10,000 caddies of grain. This was a timely reminder of a critical necessity I had nearly overlooked. Conford remained far from self-sufficient and relied heavily on external food supplies. As I sat at my desk in the castle hall, Oldmore entered with a ledger, looking visibly anxious. My lord, it's urgent, Moore said. I checked the granary. We have less than 5,000 caddies of grain left, barely enough for half a month. Meat and beans are nearly gone, and the spring crops won't be ready in time. I realized the situation was more dire than I had anticipated. I was just about to address this, I replied. I'm heading to France City myself to procure supplies. Moore sighed in relief. A wise decision, my lord. I'll prepare the procurement list immediately. He quickly scribbled the list and estimated costs on parchment. I moved to organize the team. Brendan and Richter were essential for defense and training, so they had to remain behind. Roland, our newly promoted Tier 2 knight, was the best choice, reliable and capable of handling road dangers. Roland, I called. Pick 5 of our best combat soldiers. We're riding to France City. We need to be fast. Roland obeyed, and our 7-man team was quickly assembled. The group consisted of myself, Roland, and 5 elite veteran soldiers. We took 10 horses, 7 for riding and 3 for supplies, to travel light and save time. As we prepared to depart, Brendan and Richter arrived, looking worried. My lord, Brendan said, the road is dangerous. Let me or Richter lead the team instead of you. Richter added, Conford can function without us, but not without you. Please reconsider. I appreciated their loyalty, but I had to go, though I couldn't reveal the system's role. As Lord, my personal presence shows our urgency and sincerity, which may secure better terms. I explained, patting their shoulders. Your roles here are more vital. With Roland and the elites, I'll be safe. They couldn't argue with that logic. Be careful, my lord. Return safely, they urged. Moore handed me the list and a heavy bag of gold coins from the secure chest. I strapped on the gold, mounted my horse, and signaled the team. Let's move. I led the way toward the new gate. Under the watchful, hopeful eyes of my people, we rode out of Conford, kicking up dust as we headed south toward France City. We rode hard, arriving the following afternoon to see the familiar, imposing walls of France City. After identifying ourselves to the guards, a side gate was opened for us. We entered the city. To my surprise, the stoic scribe from the governor's mansion was waiting just inside. I dismounted and saluted him. Honored scribe, I am humbled that you would wait for me. The scribe nodded coldly. No need for formalities. Count Rochefort wishes to see you. Are you available? Certainly, I replied. Please lead the way. He instructed an attendant to escort my men to the post house. Then, he gestured for me to follow. Roland looked concerned, but I signaled for him to stay calm as I followed the scribe to the governor's mansion. Inside, Count Rochefort sat at his desk, reviewing documents. He looked up, a playful smile spreading across his face. Look who it is, the dogslayer of Conford, Karl von Schmidt, the Count teased. Back so soon. Did the Solonians chase you out, or is the wilderness not to your liking? I remained respectful. Conford is improving, my lord. I've returned to report on our progress and procure urgent supplies. Report. He raised an eyebrow. Tell me, how is that pile of rocks doing? I gave a concise summary. We've cleared ruins, repaired defenses, built winter housing, restored the barracks and forge, secured water, and begun spring planting. I added, we also wiped out a black-toothed goblin tribe and discovered a high-quality flint mine with iron deposits on the North Cliff, which we are now mining. The Count's amusement faded, replaced by genuine surprise. When I mentioned the goblin tribe and the mine, he sat up straight. He hadn't expected such rapid results from a disgraced noble. I underestimated you, boy, he admitted, his tone complex. You're more capable than you look. What do you need? Grain, my lord. We need 50,000 caddies, plus salt and medicine. 50,000. He frowned. That's expensive. Do you have the coin? I patted the heavy bag of gold. The goblin raid provided enough to cover the costs. Hearing the clink of gold, the Count finally smiled genuinely. He appreciated a profitable deal. Very well, he said, turning to the scribe. Take him to old John's grain store. Tell him it's my referral and to give him a fair price. After all, Karl is now our vital frontier shield in the north. Understood, Count, the scribe replied with a bow. My thanks, Count, I said sincerely. With the scribe's help, my procurement would be smoother and cheaper. Guided by the scribe, I left the governor's mansion for France City's largest grain market, locating Old John's grain store. Old John, a shrewd merchant, immediately recognized the value of a noble accompanied by a scribe and treated me with extreme deference. The scribe stated my requirements, and John offered a price roughly 10% below market value. I insisted on inspecting the goods personally, checking several warehouses. I scrutinized the grain for moisture, impurities, and signs of spoilage, even opening random sacks for internal inspection. I selected the highest quality rye and wheat. After bargaining, we settled on 40,000 caddies of grain, 70% rye, 30% wheat, plus 10,000 caddies of beans and smoked meat. I also purchased 500 caddies of salt and a large supply of medicinal herbs. After paying nearly 300 gold coins, I hired John's transport team, 10 large carriages, to depart for Carnford tomorrow morning. As I parted ways with the scribe, the system chimed. Task: purchase 10,000 caddies of grain in France City. Completed. Reward: Charlotte Rochefort is at the inner city training ground, training with combat master Andre Stein, nearing a breakthrough to Tier 2 Knight. I was speechless. The system was disturbingly thoughtful in providing her exact location. After ensuring the scribe was gone, I headed toward the inner city training ground. The training ground was built in a natural basin beneath the bridge connecting the inner and outer city walls. It was dim and secluded, guarded by a single soldier at a side door. The guard recognized me as the noble the governor had personally seen off, so I simply said, I am here on the governor's orders. He let me pass, and I entered to see the training in progress. 2 knights in full-plate armor were locked in intense combat. Their heavy swords clashed, sending sparks flying. Their movements were precise, powerful, and highly skilled. I recognized the agile, slender knight as Charlotte Rockefort. Her opponent, a burly man, was clearly Combat Master Andre Stein. Charlotte was clearly on the defensive. Stein's attacks were like relentless waves, forcing Charlotte back. I could hear her labored breathing through her visor. Yet, she remained resilient, her footwork steady as she parried lethal strikes. I watched from the shadows, holding my breath. Seeing Charlotte's wild, powerful combat style, so different from her usual grace, made my heart race. The tide began to turn. Charlotte adapted to Stein's rhythm, her counterattacks becoming frequent and viper-like. She utilized her speed to circle him, seeking openings. Suddenly, she lunged, bypassing his defense to strike the joint of his chest plate. Though it was a training bout, it was a perfectly executed scoring blow. Charlotte pressed her advantage, ready to strike again. Stein leaped back, lifted his visor, and shouted, "Stop! Don't pursue. Focus your mind, circulate your breathing technique, and channel your battle chi to break through." Charlotte froze, realizing the moment had arrived. The intensity of the fight had pushed her to the brink, the perfect time for a breakthrough. She dropped her training sword with a loud clang. She knelt, eyes closed, still clad in her heavy armor. An invisible pressure began to radiate from her. The air grew heavy. Her skin began to glow with a faint silver light as she channeled her power. She was pushing to become a Tier 2 knight, with Stein standing guard. I clenched my fists in the shadows, tense for her. The training ground fell silent, save for her rhythmic breathing and the rising energy. Charlotte's battle chi surged, shattering the invisible barrier. A flash of gold ignited in her deep blue eyes, and a silver radiance enveloped her like moonlight. Her battle chi had sublimated. The aura faded, but her presence was now far more potent. Master Stein smiled in relief. He turned toward my corner and called out, "I imagine watching a knight's advancement is a novel experience for a commoner." Charlotte looked over, spotting me as I stepped out of the shadows. She removed her helmet, revealing a flushed, sweat-beaded face. Her damp golden hair added to her spirited appearance. "Carl, I didn't expect to see you so soon. Did the desolation of the Northern Territory scare you back?" she teased. Her breakthrough had softened her demeanor. I smiled. "Not at all. I've established a foothold in Carnford, repaired walls, cleared ruins, and started farming and mining. I'm only back to procure supplies." "Carnford," Master Stein gasped, his smile vanishing, replaced by shock and deep pain. You went to Carnford?" "Yes," I replied calmly. "I am the newly appointed pioneer lord of Carnford." Master Andre sighed, his eyes distant. "I was once an officer under Lord Marcus, the former lord of Cranford." His voice choked. 5 years ago, during the final siege, the lord sent 4 of us to seek reinforcements from France City. I was the only survivor, but the former governor of the North refused to send aid. He clenched his fists, his knuckles turning white as the memory burned within him. I described Cranford's state. "We repaired the outer bridge, but the inner portcullis is jammed. A section of the inner wall collapsed, littered with the remains of defenders and Salonians. The castle interior is scarred by the final stand. I found a scribe and a woman clutching a child. The 3rd floor was destroyed by siege weapons. We have buried all the soldiers we found and erected a monument." My calm account painted a grim, tragic picture that left the room in stifling silence. Andre's eyes reddened. "What of the basement?" "The Lord's command post was there. They may have made their final stand there." I shook my head. "I don't know of a basement. The entrance is likely buried under rubble." Andre grabbed my arm, pleading, "Lord Carl, I beg you. If you find Lord Marcus's remains, please give him a proper burial. He was a hero. He shouldn't be left in the ruins." Seeing his grief, I promised, "I will, Master Andre. If I find him, I will bury him with the highest honors." "Thank you," he said, performing a knight's salute. "I have nothing to offer now, but I, Andre Stein, will remember this. If you ever need me, I will come." Regaining his composure, he warned, "Cranford is a strategic bridgehead overlooking Amber Bay. The Salonians cannot hold it long, but they won't let you rebuild it easily. You are small now, but once you become a threat, they will strike. If that happens, call me. I will come. I will remember your counsel," I replied. Charlotte interjected with a wry smile. Can we finish the revenge talk later? I'm roasting in this armor. Andre realized they were still in full plate. He apologized. My apologies. Charlotte, you need rest after your breakthrough. He called for guards to help him remove his armor. Charlotte turned to me, her blue eyes sparkling. Carl, could you help me with my armor? I was stunned. Such a task was usually for servants or intimates. Seeing her sweat-dampened hair and tired eyes, I nodded. It would be my honor. I stood behind her, clumsily but carefully undoing the buckles and straps of her plate. The metal clinked, and I caught the scent of leather, steel, and her sweat. The process was intimate, creating a subtle, quiet atmosphere. Andre watched, a knowing smile flickering across his face before turning to concern. This young lord was being drawn into a deeper whirlpool than he realized. Once unarmored, Andre bid us farewell. Like many northern veterans, he was a drifter with no home. His presence in France City to guide Charlotte had been mere coincidence. He patted my shoulder and vanished into the evening crowd. Charlotte and I were left alone as the evening breeze stirred her golden hair. We walked through the inner city, the silence comfortable. The shared history of Cranford and our brief intimacy created an unspoken rapport. I didn't expect you to reach Cranford so quickly, Charlotte said softly. I thought it would take days. I smiled. My soldiers are excellent. It's a harsh place, but seeing people regain hope is more fulfilling than idling in France City taverns. Like a true pioneer, she said, eyeing me with appreciation. I underestimated you. You're a fine commander and a politician. Perhaps the North forced it out of me. I said, how do you feel as a Tier 2 knight? She flexed her arm, smiling. Great. The world is clearer, and my power flows better. Master Andre is incredible, she added with longing. I hope to be a combat master one day, or even more. You will, I said sincerely. We walked until we reached a quiet street near the governor's mansion, where she stopped and turned to me. The evening light highlighted her features, her blue eyes bright in the dusk. Carl, she said, how about a drink to celebrate my breakthrough? I hesitated, remembering Andre's advice. Now? Shouldn't you be resting? She smiled slyly. We aren't going to a tavern. She gestured to an elegant two-story house nearby. My home. How about it? Surprised, I agreed. Fine, but I must return to the post house to inform my men. She nodded. Understood. I need to bathe anyway. It's rude to host a guest while covered in sweat. We parted ways, and I hurried back. Roland and the others were waiting anxiously, relieved to see me. Are you all right, my lord? Roland asked. I'm fine. I met an acquaintance, I said, trying to sound casual. I have a date tonight, so I may be late. A date? Roland grew alert. Let me accompany you, even if I wait outside. I thought, Roland, you have no tact. A veteran pulled Roland aside, whispering, Captain, this is a personal matter. Don't be a fool. It's safe in the inner city. Roland reluctantly obeyed but urged me to be careful. Back in my room, I looked at my worn hunting clothes, debating whether to change into something more formal. I abandoned the idea of dressing up. I despise cumbersome attire, and a private gathering with a friend shouldn't feel stiff. After a quick wash and grooming, I stepped out. I knocked on Charlotte's door. She answered promptly, and as she opened it, a fresh, clean scent greeted me. She had just bathed, her golden hair still damp as she dried it with a towel. She wore casual linen loungewear, a stark, refreshing contrast to her usual armored, rigid appearance. You're just in time, she said with a smile, ushering me inside. The room was simple and cozy, decorated with a few swords and a shield, with a warm fire crackling in the hearth. A small table was set with roasted meat, salad, cheese, and bread. Aunt Martha, the maid, poured wine for us before bowing and excusing herself. Charlotte thanked her, and we were left alone. The candlelight, wine, and her fresh, charming presence created a delightful atmosphere. We sat down, and Charlotte raised her glass. To my advancement? I clinked my glass against hers. Congratulations, Charlotte. You're the finest knight I've ever known. She sipped her wine, her blue eyes sparkling in the candlelight. Now, tell me about your half-month in the Northern Territory. I don't believe you were just fixing houses. I began my story from the moment I left France City. I recounted ambushing the goblins and our defensive victory. I mentioned the women rescued from Blacktooth Cave and the grueling work of rebuilding Confort, clearing ruins, building shelters, and organizing production. Charlotte listened intently, her gaze never wavering. When I finished, she toasted me with genuine admiration. "You're establishing yourself in the North faster and better than I imagined." She smirked. "I assume you haven't forgotten your promise?" I laughed. "Of course not. I promised to host you once Confort was stable, but the castle is still a ruin and I'm broke." She raised an eyebrow. "Didn't Duke Schmidt provide you with startup capital?" "It was enough for personal spending, but not for rebuilding a fortress and maintaining an army," I admitted. "Between soldiers' wages, rations, and repairs, we're nearly penniless." She chuckled. "You can be so brilliant, yet so foolish." Leaning forward, she asked, "Have you considered the most direct source of funding?" "What source?" I asked. "Ask Duke Schmidt," she said. "He's incredibly wealthy. A few thousand gold coins are nothing to him, but a lifeline for you." I hesitated. My relationship with him is strained. I don't want to lose my independence. If he funds me, he'll install his own people and sideline me. "You're naive," she countered sharply. "To a duke, family is secondary to profit. Your foothold in the North is a perfect excuse for the Schmidt family to expand their influence. Investing in you is a smart political move. And if I don't want to rely on him?" I asked. She tapped the table. "My father, Count Rockefort. He's a shrewd businessman and the governor of the North. He knows how to make a profit from this barren land. You could borrow from him. With your current rapport, he might invest. It would force the Schmidt and Rockefort factions to compete, balancing your risks. Playing them against each other? I'm used. That requires political skill I'm not sure I possess." She stared at me, her blue eyes deep and serious. "I believe you do," she said firmly. As the night deepened, our wine finished and the candles burned low. I rose to leave, thanking her for the hospitality. She stood up. "I'll walk you back." "That's unnecessary. The inner city is safe," I protested. "Consider it a post-dinner stroll," she insisted, donning her cloak. I agreed, and we stepped out into the streets of France City. The city was silent, save for the distant clatter of patrolling guards. Moonlight bathed the ancient stone streets in a ghostly glow. We walked in silence, a quiet, unspoken understanding settling between us. We soon reached the post house. "Thank you again, Charlotte. I enjoyed tonight," I said. "I did too," she replied, her face soft in the moonlight. "Remember what I said. I believe in you." "I will consider it," I promised. She waved and disappeared into the night. I watched her go before entering the post house. Roland and a guard were on duty and seemed relieved to see me return safely. I greeted them and went to my room, but sleep eluded me. I tossed and turned, my mind replaying our conversation. Every expression of hers, the way she listened, her sharp, confident insights, remained vivid. I had always seen her as a pure warrior, a knight seeking strength. Tonight, her political and economic acumen completely shattered that perception. Charlotte not only understood my predicament, but pinpointed the simplest solution I'd overlooked, even mapping out a strategy to navigate the power struggle between the two factions. Seek direct investment. She was right. With Carnford as a strategic asset and nearly 400 increasingly cohesive subjects, I held genuine value. To my father, who craved influence, and Count Rockefort, who needed a stable front, I was a premium client worth backing. Yet, could I really outplay old foxes like Schmidt and Rockefort? The thought weighed heavily on me. They were masters of power. My experience was negligible. Accepting their capital felt like inviting wolves into my home, with traps at every turn. But Charlotte's final, unwavering assertion, "I believe you can," lingered. It rippled through my mind like a stone in a still lake, inexplicably igniting my fighting spirit. If she believed in me, why should I falter? I lay in the dark, mentally simulating scenarios and countermeasures. The risks were massive, but the potential gains were equally alluring. This might be the only shortcut to securing development funds and breaking Carnford's fiscal deadlock. My thoughts raced until the pre-dawn gray light touched the window, and exhaustion finally pulled me into sleep. Even in my dreams, the blonde girl's image and her words of trust remained. Roland's urgent knocking woke me. "My lord, the governor's scribe is waiting." I shook off the haze, seeing the sun was already high. I splashed my face with cold water, dressed, and hurried to the post-house lobby. The stoic scribe bowed. "My apologies, Lord Carl, but the Count requests your immediate presence at the governor's mansion." "Understood," I replied, suppressing my fatigue as I followed him back to the familiar building. In the office, Count Rockefort sipped wine. Seeing my visible exhaustion, he offered a mocking smile. "Our diligent Lord of Carnford, sleeping in? Not your style. Did you sample France City's nightlife?" I thought, if only you knew I was dining with your daughter. I kept that to myself. I had a restless night. "Why the early summons, Count?" The Count turned serious. "I need a favor. You are the governor and my superior. Serving you is my duty, not a favor." He nodded. "The deadline for the Northern Frontier Expansion Decree is in 2 days. The other noble partners must depart." He looked disdainful. "They're bringing useless soldiers and empty heads. They won't last 50 miles against goblins or wolves. I can't answer to the Interior Ministry if they die." He looked at me. "I know you're eager to return, but I need you to stay 2 days. You have experience and know the routes. I want you to look after them and ensure they reach their territories." I weighed the request. Delaying would hurt Carnford's progress, but it was a reasonable request and a chance to deepen my ties with the Count. "I understand. Ensuring the safety of the expedition is vital for the northern defense. I will stay." "Excellent," the Count smiled. "I knew I could count on you." Sensing his good mood, I took a breath. "I am happy to assist, but I have a request regarding Carnford's survival." "Oh, speak." "Carnford is in ruins. We don't need gold, we need supplies. Livestock, farm tools, and especially pig iron. Our tools are broken, and we are running out of even the simplest nails." I looked him in the eye. "I want your investment, not as a loan, but as direct supplies." The Count tapped his desk. "Investment? Business requires collateral. What can you offer?" "Carnford is a ruin. We found a high-quality flint mine. I offer the mining rights as collateral." He scoffed. "A flint mine? It's worth less than the cattle on my ranch." "Not enough." My heart sank. I had nothing else. Then, the Count sat up, his playfulness replaced by the cold, stern aura of the northern governor. "I will give you the supplies, more than you asked for. Livestock, tools, iron. No collateral needed." I stared at him, stunned. His gaze was sharp as a hawk's. "I only need one promise." "Name it." "This autumn, the Solonians will raid. I need you and Carnford to be a nail driven into the front at Amber Bay. You must hold, no matter the cost. Even if you are the last one standing. Even if you die in that ruined castle, you do not retreat." His words hit me like a war hammer. "Use your castle, your troops, and your life to buy me time and relieve pressure on France City. That is my return." The silence was deafening. I heard my own heart pounding. It was a cruel, heavy trade. He wasn't investing in growth. He was investing in a meat grinder. After a long silence, I met his gaze and said firmly, "I can." Leaving the mansion, my heart felt heavier than before. I knew the Count hadn't asked for collateral. He had defined Carnford's ultimate fate, to be the first line of flesh and blood against the Solonians. Yet, even without this deal, did I have any other choice when the Solonians arrived? Abandoning my people to flee like a dog back to France City? I couldn't imagine it, nor could I face myself if I did. That would betray everyone and trample my own dignity. Perhaps I would die in those ruins like my predecessor. If death was the price, I would prepare thoroughly to make that stand count, perhaps even finding a way to survive. Since I was stuck in France City for 2 days, I decided to use the time to recruit more skilled talent for Carnford. We had enough laborers for now. The 300 slaves and refugees needed time to integrate. But we only had 4 core craftsmen: Old Moore, Hans the mason, Wally the carpenter, and Finn the hydraulic engineer. That was far from enough for a territory needing rapid reconstruction. We needed more blacksmiths, carpenters, masons, and perhaps experts in animal husbandry and textiles. The problem was clear. Why would skilled craftsmen in France City abandon their comfortable lives for the dangers of the northern frontier? While soldiers might risk their lives for glory, craftsmen value stability. I realized my target demographic must be those struggling, the debt-ridden, the failed competitors, or those with black histories who couldn't find work in the city. Only these individuals would be enticed by the promise of a fresh start in Confort. I lacked the connections to find such people, and I couldn't bother the Count again after securing his investment. That left only one person, Charlotte Rockefort. As the governor's daughter, she knew the city's underbelly and its less mainstream residents. Though I felt awkward asking for another favor so soon, the development of my territory was worth the embarrassment. I headed to her residence, determined to seek the help of the Northern Rose. Her maid, Martha, greeted me warmly and led me inside. Charlotte was lounging in her living room, a stark contrast to her usual armored knight persona. She teased me about not providing lunch. I explained that I'd been at the governor's mansion all morning. She asked why, and I mentioned the Count's request for me to lead the other pioneer lords. Charlotte scoffed, revealing she had been ordered to supervise the useless young masters as well. I felt a surge of excitement at the prospect of traveling with her. She then asked about the investment. When I told her the Count granted it without interest or collateral, she was stunned. I relayed the grim condition. We must hold Confort against the Solonians at all costs, to the last man. The room went silent. Charlotte looked at me with a mix of shock and concern. A typical Rockefort deal, she noted. I told her I had no choice, and that I would have made the same stand regardless. She sighed and moved on, asking why I had really come. I explained my need for craftsmen. She jumped up, ready to help. Follow me. We arrived at the Anvil and Goblet Guild, the city's largest hub for artisans. Charlotte marched me straight to the office of Bastian Crow, a guild director. Bastian was flustered by her sudden entry, but quickly turned obsequious. Charlotte introduced me and my need for skilled, unlucky workers. Bastian immediately understood the subtext. I clarified that I didn't care about their pasts, only their skills and their willingness to work for better pay and comfort. Seeing a chance to offload the guild's burdens for a commission, Bastian became incredibly enthusiastic. He sent out notices, and within an hour, the office was filled with desperate, talented artisans. Bastian screened them, and I interviewed the best candidates. I met Hector, a debt-ridden blacksmith, Martin, a blunt mason, Norman, an aging stonecutter, and Elliot, a talented apprentice. I focused on their craft, not their failures, earning their trust. I hired 8 of them on the spot, providing an advance on their settlement allowance. Watching them regain hope gave me a sense of accomplishment. I owed this success entirely to Charlotte. Charlotte sprang from the sofa, tossing her blanket aside. "I'm bored anyway," she declared. "Come with me." Charlotte briskly changed into casual attire and led me out the door. We navigated several streets until we reached a bustling building in the heart of France City's artisan district. A massive wooden sign hung above the entrance, depicting a hammer striking an anvil beside a giant beer mug, identifying the building as the Anvil and Goblet Guild. "This is the largest general artisans guild in France City," Charlotte explained. "Every registered craftsman is on record here, so the director is the right person to see." Charlotte, clearly familiar with the place, led me straight inside, ignoring the curious stares as we headed directly to an office on the second floor. The office door was labeled for Director Bastian Crow. Without knocking, Charlotte pushed it open and walked right in. A balding, bespectacled middle-aged man hunched over his desk jumped at the intrusion. He looked up, ready to snap, but his irritation vanished the moment he saw Charlotte, replaced by a mix of deference and weary resignation. "Miss Rockefort, what brings you here?" Director Bastian stammered, scrambling to his feet. "Bastian, I have a business proposition for you," Charlotte said, gesturing toward me. "This is Karl von Schmidt, the pioneer lord of Confort. He needs to recruit skilled artisans, blacksmiths, carpenters, masons, and stonecutters, who happen to be down on their luck." Director Bastian paused, his eyes sharpening with shrewd understanding as he grasped the implication behind my need for down-on-their-luck artisans. He rubbed his hands together, asking cautiously, "How many men does the Lord require, and what exactly are your requirements regarding their luck?" "I need as many skilled workers as possible," I interjected. "I don't care why they're struggling in France City, be it debt or competition. Confort offers steady work, better pay, and a fresh start for anyone who can actually do the job." Director Bastian's eyes lit up. He was intimately familiar with such requests. The guild was always overflowing with skilled craftsmen who had fallen on hard times for one reason or another. These struggling craftsmen were a burden to the guild. Offloading them meant clearing the roster while collecting a commission, a perfect arrangement for everyone involved. Understood. Bastion beamed, his attitude shifting instantly. I'll immediately post a recruitment notice for the Northern Frontier Reconstruction Project. I'll personally vet the candidates to ensure they're all highly skilled. Bastion scribbled several notes and ordered an apprentice to deliver them immediately. The response was instantaneous. Within an hour, the office was packed with hopeful craftsmen. The room filled with craftsmen whose worn clothes and anxious expressions betrayed their hardships, yet their eyes burned with a desperate hunger for work. Charlotte and I stood to the side, observing the crowd. Director Bastion proved highly efficient, rapidly vetting candidates by questioning their expertise and inspecting their tools and samples. Soon, several qualified candidates stood before me. I reviewed their list. Hector, a blacksmith with exceptional skill, currently drowning in debt from alcoholism and gambling, having already mortgaged his workshop. Martin, a mason whose exceptional speed is matched only by his blunt honesty. He offended a noble patron and has been effectively blacklisted by the guild. Norman, a veteran stonemason with vast experience, now struggling to find work due to his age and living in poverty. Elliot, a carpenter's apprentice with immense talent, remained uncertified after his master's death, leaving him unable to find formal work. I spoke with each candidate individually, focusing on their technical expertise and problem-solving methods rather than their troubled histories. My sincerity and genuine respect for their technical expertise quickly earned the trust of these desperate men. I finalized the decision on the spot, recruiting these 8 craftsmen. After advancing them a portion of their settlement allowance to settle their affairs in France City, I instructed them to join our caravan for Conford in 2 days. Seeing these craftsmen regain hope filled me with a sense of accomplishment. Talent is the most precious lifeblood for my territory's development. All of this was thanks to the Northern Frontier rose beside me, whose seemingly casual presence always provided the precise help I needed. "Thank you, Charlotte," I said sincerely. She shrugged. "It's nothing. I was bored anyway," though her slight smile betrayed her satisfaction. After finalizing the artisan recruitment and lunching with Charlotte, I returned to the post house. I immediately requested parchment, ink, and a quill from the staff. I needed to write 2 letters to Franklin, the Schmidt family seat. The first was to my nominal father, Duke Schmidt. I composed the letter with careful aristocratic etiquette, balancing humility with subtle, sharp undertones. After standard greetings, I pivoted to a slightly exaggerated account of my brilliant achievements in Conford. I detailed the total annihilation of a goblin tribe, the restoration of the fortress, the discovery of a valuable flint mine, and the integration of 400 settlers for spring planting, painting Conford as a thriving, strategic asset in the northern frontier. I then subtly mentioned that while development was rapid, the initial capital requirements were immense. I requested investment from my father, hinting that this would secure the family's long-term influence in the north. The second letter was for my mother, the neglected Duchess. My tone shifted to one of genuine warmth and concern. I focused on the vast beauty of the north, the hospitality of the subjects, and the hope of rebuilding our home, rather than the hardships. I urged her to take care of her health and made a solemn promise. I vowed that once I established a secure home in Conford, I would bring her away from the cold, toxic environment of the ducal estate to live with me in peace. I sealed both letters, marking the recipients clearly. I paid the post house staff extra to ensure the fastest, most secure delivery to the Schmidt estate. Dozens of kilometers north of France City, a Solon army unit moved slowly across the wilderness. They carried looted grain and textiles, accompanied by a group of numb, rope-bound Plantagenet subjects. Compared to the triumphant Solon warbands of winter, this group's haul was meager, and the atmosphere was heavy. Ragnar, a Solon cavalry scout, rode his sturdy northern steed toward the center of the formation. He reported to the commander, Thorstein, "Battle commander, we have cleared the Plantagenet wall. That shadow to the east is France City." Thorstein, a rugged man with a thick beard, sat atop a massive warhorse. The Solon military is organized into battle commanders, 300 men, regiments, 1,500 men, and 8 legions. These include the wolf, bear, tiger, sparrow, cavalry, hound, sword, and rain legions. Thorstein's unit belonged to the Sword Legion. Thorstein grunted impatiently, his face dark. His autumn raid had been a disaster. They had wasted half a month besieging the minor town of Windsand. The siege depleted his forces, and the town's supplies had been exhausted, leaving almost no loot. In a rage, Thorstein had ordered a massacre, only to regret it later. Without survivors, he had no slaves to show for his efforts. He had no way to explain this to his legion commander. He dreaded the spring distribution of spoils, fearing punishment. Sensing his mood, Ragnar whispered, "Commander, I captured a farmer fleeing Friend's city who gave me intel." "What intel?" Thorstein asked disinterestedly. "The new pioneer lords appointed by the Plantagenet kingdom leave Friend's city the day after tomorrow. They're just pampered nobles with green troops. We could wait for them." Ragnar grinned greedily. "Once they leave the city, we ambush them. We'll get grain, supplies, and ransoms for the nobles themselves. It would more than make up for our losses." Thorstein's eyes lit up. Raiding soft, inexperienced nobles was far easier than storming fortified cities. The potential reward outweighed the risk. His gloom vanished, replaced by the predatory hunger of a wolf. "Good idea, Ragnar," Thorstein ordered. "Move the army off the road into the Black Forest toward France City. Send all scouts to watch the city. No fires, no noise." "Yes, battle commander." Ragnar saluted. The Solon army shifted silently into the dense, dark black forest like ghosts. The barbarian soldiers sharpened their weapons, their eyes burning with greed. They waited like wolves for the fat sheep to leave their safe nest. Standing at the forest edge, Thorstein sneered toward France City. "Plantagenet lords, your timing is perfect. Your wealth and blood will cover my losses." By the next day, all preparations were complete. Supplies were loaded, and Count Rockefort's promised goods were scheduled for delivery in 5 days. The recruited artisans were ready, many bringing their families to start anew in the north. I found myself with unexpected free time at the post house. Just as I considered visiting Charlotte to strengthen our bond, the system notification chimed. Daily task updated. Task: go on a date with Charlotte Rockefort. Incomplete. A perfect task. My hesitation vanished. It was an ordered date, so I had to go. I groomed myself and headed to her home.